Start streaming the show.
2 minutes until showtime.
Let's get the mic in front of me. Early show prep stuff that y'all get to see only here on YouTube. LOL. We will be starting the show in a couple minutes. 2 minutes or so. So let's go ahead and I'm going to mute myself a second, and I'll be back shortly.
One minute until showtime. Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Using gerrymandering, voter suppression, and other nefarious tactics, the Republican Party has manipulated our electoral system to maintain as much control as possible despite being a party in the minority. Liberal Dan Radio seeks to change that, and I need your help in doing so. Liberal Dan Radio has partnered with Levelfield to help us use tools that are typically only available to big money donors. When you go to stopthecoup.liberaldan.com and make your contribution, it will encourage other voters to reach out to their legislators to pass legislation to stop gerrymandering and voter suppression, and target elected officials who refuse to protect the vote. Every eligible voter should be able to cast a ballot, and that ballot should have the same power as everyone else. I can't do this alone. I need your help. So please go to stopthecoup.liberaldan.com and make your contribution today. That's stopthecoup.liberaldan.com. Stopthecoup.liberaldan.com. Political advertising paid for by Levelfield. Contributions are not tax deductible as charitable contributions.
Back to Liberal Dan Radio, talk from the left. That's right. This is your host, Dan Zimmerman, coming at you from New Orleans, Louisiana. To join the conversation, it's area code 914-803-4131. That is 914-803-4131. Also, if you can join us, if you have a free blogtalkradio.com account, you can go sign into that free account, come to the episode page at blogtalkradio.com/liberaldan, and you can join us in the chat room as well. And you can also come over to YouTube, youtube.liberaldan.com or youtube.com/liberaldanradio, and you can sign in with your account there, and you can go ahead and, excuse me, join that chat room as well. And furthermore, if you're listening after the live broadcast, you can always leave your comments, questions, concerns, etc. on the show thread at liberaldan.com. Facebook.com/LiberalDan or at LiberalDanRadio on Twitter. And also leave your comments on the YouTube thread over here on Liberal Dan Radio on YouTube as well. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and share the videos with your friends. I'm going to be trying to put a little more content up on YouTube soon. Lots of stuff. I've been busy with my 9-to-5 job, so I have to take care of that first because, got to pay the bills, till at least I get tons of followers and subscribers and people supporting my Patreon. If you want to support the Patreon for Liberal Dan Radio, you can go to patreon.liberaldan.com or patreon.com/liberaldan, and you can, for as little as $3 a month, support the show. You can also buy commercial advertising as well, or sponsor bits, or sponsor the entire studios or whatever. All of those prices there on patreon.com/liberaldan. Speaking of patrons, want to give a shout out to the host. Well, first I want to give a shout out to Demonox, the first Liberal Dan patron. My thoughts go out to him and Sadie Sins. They're having some kitty issues right now. I think their kitties are in the vet at the moment, dealing with a concerning issue. I don't know exactly what's going on yet, but shouts out to them, sending them all my love. Also shouts out to the other Liberal Dan Radio patrons, your boy Chris, Cesar out in California, and Angie across the pond. Thank you all very much. I appreciate your support. I also want to give a shout out to the host of the most, Nimbus Yosh, my little brother, with the smooth sounds of the Percy podcast. We're still waiting on another episode of the Percy podcast to come around. I know he had been dealing with some Twitter drama. We have some more Twitter dramas about to come around the bend, so to speak. We will see what goes on with Twitter. We'll be discussing that at the bottom half of the hour, and that and many of the issues coming from the month of April with friend of the show, Hal Sparks, who will be joining us at 8:30 Central here on blogtalkradio.com/LiberalDan and on Liberal Dan Radio on YouTube. And you can go ahead and join us for that conversation as well. We should talk about several fun and serious things as well. So we got a bunch of stuff to talk about, I guess, before we get to the bottom half of the hour. One of the things I wanted to do is, the past couple of shows, I've been rather amused. I don't necessarily want to be kicking the dead horse about this, but I've been a little bit amused over the idea of what's going on with this guy, Cash Money, from Ohio, regular caller to Jeff Carrera show, that's down here in New Orleans, Louisiana. Cash Money thinks themselves very important, and so I went ahead and I challenged him to a debate on his show. Now, I don't think that's going to go very well. I think he's could probably be the one who's going to interrupt a lot, and I'll probably just expect him to just constantly interrupt because he thinks that he's more important than everybody else in the world. And if you've listened to the show, you've seen that, and you'll see some more of that in these clips that I have to share as well. Because it's just kind of fun to see, just poking the bear, just kind of see what's going on with this guy this week. How can I rile him up? Because it just gives you really just a lens into the mind and the mindset and the attitude of your typical Trump supporter, somebody who is just allowed himself to be used, and the Trump supporters and Trump politicians who are wanting these people's support have latched on to this level of just mania almost that they're taking advantage of, and they're stoking those fires in those people to making them angrier and angrier and angrier. And you'll see, because I eventually called him out on something. I called him out between these two calls that I have, and you'll see his error if you know the Constitution. But let's go ahead and hear his first rant, and we'll talk about that, and then we'll play his second rant where he tries to crawfish a little bit. And by crawfish, when you kind of shoot water at a crawfish as you're trying to kind of rinse them off before you throw them into the boil. Down here, if you do crawfish boils, they're very good. We might have one this weekend. They will back away. They just back up. That's how they kind of try to escape. So that's what people refer to as crawfishing. So let's go ahead and hear the first sound bite. I could have split this up, I guess, into multiple ones, but it's just a 2-minute clip. So we're going to listen to that.
And that guest that you had on right before you got off of Real America's Voice this morning, who didn't want to blame China. He ain't going to sell no books with that attitude. And he changed
Right.
his attitude. People like that. Where is his intentions and what's he after? What's he gaining for pushing what he's pushing? I'm tired of this world trying to make money. We need to shut it down for a few years and focus on America. Now, what was said? I heard you say something. He wants to have an argument with me. What was said?
Well, Liberal Dan challenged you to a debate on this program, and that
You
was
let me know
issued
when and
earlier.
where. It doesn't really matter to me. The people stand behind my word. He does have no clue. Most of the rules we're living by today, 2 million people were in America in 1776 when the Constitution was written. 2 million. Now we have 330 million. Probably 250 million are actual voters, people that are legally allowed to vote in each and every election. And for me to have a conversation with one idiot who's drinking the water, it's ridiculous. It's egotistical. It's why we're where we're at. The education to him is in my solution. When I have the ability to ask all 260 million of them whatever they think on any particular subject at any particular minute, and they respond, well, 200 million people at one time, well, that's an education for an idiot moron. That'll make you shut up quick. I wonder where trans would be if we actually put it to the vote to all the people. I don't care if Nancy Pelosi's going on Drag Race TV on Paramount Plus. It's ridiculous, the brainwashing we're dealing with in America. If you want In God We Trust taken out of the Constitution, take it out first. But until we do that, I'm not even a highly religious man. But it is what we have. It is what we've all been educated. In God we trust. And there's no room for trans. In God we trust. I'm sorry. But if he wants to actually have a conversation, I don't know if we can have it on the radio, because am I politically correct enough to say all the right words at the right time? But you set it up, Jeff. You know me well. You got my number on speed
All
dial.
right. I will.
I'll talk to you in a minute.
All right, so there you go. So the people will stand by his word, huh? And that's what he believes. He's very egotistical. But first of all, he's tired of people trying to make money. They need to put the country first. He's tired of people trying to make money. Now, if a liberal said this, they would call him a communist. They would call him a socialist. They would attack him. They would say this, earning money is one of the things that Americans love to do. But, Jeff never called him out for saying that he's tired of people trying to earn money. It's bizarre. People stands by his word. I'm sure that there's a bunch of people who agree with him. I'm sure there's a bunch of people who agree with me. I don't know. I don't think that he would have a majority of the people responding to his polling device or whatever he's going to go. But the thing, and also he talked about trans. He brought up trans rights for whatever reason. I don't know why that was at all relevant. Maybe he's just feeling that's his issue of the week that he wants to pick on. But rights for anybody shouldn't be left to a subject of a vote. If you ask the people of the country, and 75% of the country said, we don't believe that trans people should be treated equally, we don't believe that trans people should have rights, then that still shouldn't be a reason to say, okay, trans people don't get rights. That rights should be something that's that people have regardless of government action. Government should not have the ability to trample over your rights, and usually that is something that conservatives would love to grasp on and talk about and agree with, except for when it comes to things that they don't agree with, because hypocrisy is a conservative prerequisite. But I love how he's when he has the ability to ask. So this grand plan of his is that he's going to be asking the questions, not just the people of the United States are going to ask these questions. He thinks that he should be the one asking the questions. And of course, if he is the one asking the questions, that's problematic, because then he is driving the narrative, and no one person should be driving the narrative. But when he called me egotistical, but he thinks he's the one that should be having the ability to ask questions. But he also called me an idiot, and then said that if you want to do all of this stuff, you need to take In God We Trust out of the Constitution. In God We Trust wasn't in the Constitution. Not once. Not at all. Not ever. Those are words that have never been found in the Constitution, period. Yet he wants to call me an idiot. I haven't necessarily invited him on this show. I wouldn't know how to reach out to him. It would be very hard to. I don't even know if I'd want him to be on the show. There's plenty of other conservatives who I can debate on this show. But if he were to happen to find Liberal Dan Radio, Talk from the Left, that's right, and want to call into the show and say, hey, this is Cash Money, I'm angry at you, and we would have a debate, and I wouldn't immediately kick him off. And let's just put it that way. I would allow him to say his piece, to have them back and forth. I have a feeling that I would probably have to mute him from time to time in order for me to get a word in edgewise. But what is that, Donald?
It is what it is.
Thank you, Donald. But the idea that he said that I'm an idiot, but he is like, in order to do whatever it is that our liberals want to do, that we would have to take "In God We Trust" out of the Constitution. It was never in there. So then the next day,
only one solution. We have to ask us all what we actually think. They fear that the most. You think they fear the mama bears? What would they fear if the whole country actually got to chime in on their voices? And I know there's so many people, there's so many opinions, but ultimately, when you ask us all at the same time and you see 200 million respond to a positive, that's wisdom, that's common sense, that's the intentions of we the people. Let me get to that comment. I know that "In God We Trust" is not in our Constitution.
Sure, you know it, sure. I think if he got his way, and if we were able to ask the electorate of the United States of America questions about certain things. Now, he's brought up stuff like, Tony Fauci, and whether or not we should ask the people of the country whether or not we should be hiring or firing Tony Fauci. Employment decisions should not be left up to a decision from the masses. Like that's, ruling power comes from a, true executive power comes from a mandate from the masses. And so, but wielding that executive power would be you've elected somebody to wield that executive power. Now that person should be able to hire and fire under the laws set forth, i.e. if you need to appoint somebody, you have to get Senate approval, but otherwise hiring is done as is the executive branch, and you give the president the ability to hire and fire the staff that he will have. The idea that hiring and firing decisions should be something that's left to we have 3 concurrent viewers. I want to shout out to y'all. Thank you so much at the moment. I'm sure we'll have more coming in. Say hi in the chat. Let me know where you're from. Also, please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Anyway, so if you are, I just think he would be very, very surprised when the majority of America, when America's asked, what should we do about this, right? And then the majority of America says, oh, well, we should enforce it and support it. We shouldn't get rid of it. And then he would be like, oh, well, there must be something wrong then. Because that's what'll happen. They'll want to have, I asked on the show, I asked Jeff, and I didn't hear back from anybody else yet. I was just wondering, if you could have the possibility of, either you have an election where every single person in this country who is eligible to vote casts a ballot, does so legally. So without a shadow of a doubt that every single person about that ballot that's cast is a correct and proper one. All right? So you do that. You have that choice, and you have to deal with the results of that choice. Or your other choice is install Donald Trump as dictator for life. Of course, Jeff says I would want the election because they can't say the silent part. But in reality, what they're doing is they want to make it so that Trump can be, in power as a minority power. The Republican Party is a minority party. That's why I have the Stop the Coup bit that I talk about at the beginning of the show and that I talk about during commercials. The Stop the Coup bit is all about the fact that the Republicans are trying to retain power. They're trying to hold on to power, and they're angry about it. And you can hear from that guy, it's not just about my feud with this one guy. It's that this guy and how he speaks gives you an insight into how a lot of them, a big chunk of them, sound. That's the type of anger and frustration that leads to people marching the Capitol on January 6th of 2021. And we have to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it so we can deal with the problems that they cause. And is there a possibility of reaching out to any of them and reaching an understanding and just listening to them and be like, hey, I understand that you're upset about this, but here's why we can't do this, that, and the other. Is there a possibility that I could, that anybody, and those people could be convinced to change their mind and to calm them down, to be less angry, to understand that they've been lied to from their politicians? The joke is, how do you tell when a politician is lying? It's when his lips are moving. But there's, for some reason, they don't want to put that same idea towards Trump. I believe that Trump is lying to them. They think he's just telling the truth. Really? Is there any way to reach out to them and get them to come on our side or at least come to a middle ground where we can have compromise? And because that's what Joe Biden wanted when he was elected. I honestly thought that was probably the biggest problem with Joe Biden and his campaign and his ideas in his campaign was that he was far too optimistic about his chances of being able to bring this country together. Because at this point in time, I think the Republican Party leadership is way so far gone. They are way too far gone at this point to be able to bring them back because they're so afraid of that chunk of those angry, white, conservative men like Cash Money here. They are angry about him, and they don't want to, allow him to have power. The power. They don't want to allow him to have the power, or they don't want to give up. They don't want to give up their power by showing that they're weak and able. Because as soon as they compromise, they're a rhino. So anyway, let's go ahead and take the first commercial break. We'll come back, take your calls as well. Remember, at the bottom half of the hour, we're going to be having Hal Sparks on the show as well. 914-803-4131. 914-803-4131. This is Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left, that's right.
Are you planning a trip to Disney soon? Do you want help avoiding spending mistakes and making the most of your vacation? Then check out budgeteers.com, a new site devoted to helping you get the most mouse for your money. What kinds of tickets should you get? Is the dining plan a good deal for you? Should you stay on grounds or not? Should you buy park hoppers? Many other sites are filled with information about what other people like to do, but Budgeteers is geared to help you make the best decision for you. So check out budgeteers.com or go to youtube.com/budgeteers and help make your trip the best it can be. Budgeteers.com is not a travel agency and it is not affiliated with the Disney Corporation or any of its holdings. In a world gone mad, one progressive will do a bad movie trailer guy impression to get you to listen to his show. There's only one thing that I like better than the Liberal Dan Radio Minicast. Alright, Bill, that's enough of that. On the Liberal Dan Radio Minicast, you will hear an honest discussion of the day's issues, with some personal bits in between. You might even hear what the other side has to say, sometimes even in their own voices. So become one of the Liberal Dan family, because family means no one gets left behind or forgotten. To hear those bad impressions and more, tune into the Liberal Dan Radio Minicast. Talk from the left, that's right. And I think to myself, what a wonderful show. Yeah. If you enjoy Liberal Dan Radio, there's many ways that you can support the show. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can like me on Facebook or follow me on Twitter or TikTok. And you can become a Liberal Dan Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you can get a shout out. Higher levels get the opportunity to vote on what I do next on the podcast, the minicast, or on YouTube. You can even buy commercial advertising or sponsor bits. So go to patreon.liberaldan.com and support the show today.
Hey there, podcast listeners. This is Demonox, host of The World According to Knox. It's time for Season 2, where I take you on another trip through my world. The world of movies, video games, pop culture, and more. Relate them to the world around you. Don't forget to leave a question for Marscat, and find me on Twitter by the handle XDemonox. That's letter X like X-Men, DEMINOX. Now enjoy the rest of your podcast.
And welcome back to Liberal Dan Radio, Talk from the Left, that's right. This is your host, Dan Zimmerman, coming at you from New Orleans, Louisiana. To join the conversation, it's 914-803-4131, 914-803-4131. At the bottom half of the hour, about 7 minutes or so, we're going to have a friend of the show, Hal Sparks, on. Big shouts out to everyone who is participating in the chat. Shellbell, Jeffrey, Nancy, WW157, Gail, Pam, Thazoo Mob, Cynthia from Texas, Mountain Lady, Longhorn, Becky Carpenter, Stephanie, was it Daring Eyebrow Twins? Awesome. Thank y'all for joining, and please remember to like the show and subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate it. I'm trying to get this channel growing and having a good time doing the show as well. So I bet to shout out to all of the people who are new to the show, who are new to watching. Hey Tyler, hey Dragon, Kurt, Pam. I do kind of two bits. I'm going to play the second bit when Hal gets on because I kind of want his opinion on that. But another bit that I do during the show is something called Words of Redneck Wisdom, where I find some horrible things that conservatives say and then mock them and put them to classical music. So clearly these are things that I don't agree with, but here we go. Here is this week's, actually that's last week's installment. There we go. This is this week's installment of no, that's Hypocrite of the Week. Hold on. I'm having problems finding my Words of Redneck Wisdom. Lovely. All right, well, we will find Words of Redneck Wisdom in a second. Maybe we'll do it in a little bit. Is this last week's? I don't know. Brain fart right here. Can't seem to find my Words of Redneck Wisdom. Is it this one? This is last week? I don't know. We'll see. We'll play this. We'll play the last one. Love my technical difficulties.
And now, Words of Redneck Wisdom, brought to you by Liberal Dan Radio.
And I said this before, everybody needs to call the White House and let them know about things, because Abbott, instead of him shipping them back to Mexico, that's just publicity stunt. I've seen the gaps that they're coming through, and it's not going to take you to plug all that. But nobody seems to have the will to do it. So we're gonna reap what we sow, and that's just all there is to it. And nobody cares.
How big of a danger do you think this is, Leon?
The magnitude of it is going to be untold. That's just all there is to it, because you're letting people in who are ignorant, who won't assimilate, and they do know welfare, and some of them do know to get jobs under the table. And I said this before, everybody needs to call their Congress people and tell them, look, or their attorney generals and say, look, we want this stopped. We want the remittance stopped. That when they send the money back, we want something done about it. And the business people who hire these people, I told you this before, they need to go to jail if you find out that you hired an illegal alien. Lose their businesses and have to pay back whatever they pay the illegal aliens there to the state.
And this concludes Words of Redneck Wisdom, brought to you by Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left, that's right.
Now this is the same guy that I had in a bunch of clips from. It must not have gotten uploaded. I don't know where this week's video was. I do agree with the guy one thing that if a business owner pays somebody, less than what the minimum wage is, then they should be punished, whether or not that person is an undocumented worker or somebody who is a worker who's just getting paid, illegally. Any illegal pay should be a punishment on the business person. So we'll agree on that. But otherwise, yes. I am whenever this guy calls in as Leon to this other show that I listen to, it does remind me very much of Ficus. And speaking of Ficus is one of Hal's his voices that he does, and a lot of the people also recognize that in the chat. I was like, so apparently we agree. But I do want to welcome back on the show friends of the show from Infotainment Worlds, Hal Sparks, Mega Worldwide, from InfotainmentWars.com. Friend of the show, Hal Sparks. How are you doing today, Hal? Thank you very much for coming back on the program.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm very disappointed that I didn't get to play the one from this week, that for some reason I couldn't find it in all my clips, because he said the very classic conservative line of, I'm not racist, but, and then went on to show how he's racist.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a, and in some cases it's a level of racism that's so entrenched they don't recognize it. That's what I would say healable and forgivable, where people don't recognize that they may have an internalized bias, that kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff you could talk people through. And they go, I didn't realize I was being rude to y'all. That happens in the South sometimes.
Right.
What our biggest problem is currently, I would argue, is the Republicans who know full well they're being racist, bigoted, anti-gay, bullyish, pro-Russian, whatever the thing is. They know, they're very aware. And yet because they're surrounded by so many ignoramuses, they can pretend they're one of them with some level of plausible deniability.
And and I've said this since 2016, I guess, or maybe even 2015, that ever since Donald Trump threw his hat in the ring, it has emboldened those type of people to be louder, to embrace, the things that they didn't want to say in public way back in the day, because back in the day, they were rightly shamed for such things, for such feelings, and now they're like, well, our president can say it, so we can say it too.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing too is that a lot of them, if you listen to them, when you hear phrases like "he says what I say" or "he says what I feel" or those kind of things, the part of what's happening is it's actually kind of in the growth arc of humanity, it's actually not a bad thing, because the reaction they're having is that they used to be able to sit at at the corner of a diner or something and say all their awful, and the person next to them would go, yeah, totally, I'm with you, man. And now they move away or tell them to shut up or just ignore them, and they don't get the social cred that they got from that kind of behavior. And it's bizarre to them. The world, it's one of these things where, and we're not the only society this happens in. It's happening all over the world in different levels of society everywhere. But they feel like the world has moved on without them and somehow didn't get their permission to do it. So they're, Trump is this guy who was like, no, it was wrong of them to not listen to you. You were right. He suddenly shows up, sits right down at the counter next to him and goes, I hear you, buddy. And that's all they need. He doesn't have to make sense. He can try and sell them a timeshare while they're sitting there. They don't mind being completely suckered at all, because they're so lonely in their thought, in a way that, by the way, they used to not be. They used to be surrounded by like-minded people. And now they have to drive all the way across the country in a Winnebago and go to their 25th Trump rally to feel like they belong to something.
Right. Yeah.
That's always impressive to me.
Yeah, I mean, I had so many people come to my rallies. It's the same people. It's the same people. Where,
yeah. More. If you watch any of the new ones, he more often than not, he'll point to somebody he recognizes and then basically flinch that he was like, oh crap, I just pointed out the fact that I'm surrounded by lunatics.
right.
who are, sycophants. And he said, and there are a couple of them though. He's also recognizing, the sort of influencer class of the people who like him. He's recognizing that a lot of those people, you got to keep them close, because if they leave, they're the ones who bring 4 other people, or, who, aren't these people's close friends, but they put up with their crap and they don't mind. If you're driving and buying a beer, I'm cool. Right. So they, they're fine with, going to, all right, it's Raleigh, we'll go to Charlotte and see it. They're not going to drive all the way to Nevada like this person does, but they'll take the shorter road trip.
Right.
And he knows he can't blow those people off because they're the super fans.
Right.
You can't afford to treat those people badly. Now, as desperate as he is.
Yeah, I mean, completely. Especially because, they know that, in general, as I was talking earlier, the Republican Party is a minority party. I mean, they don't have the majority of the people in this country. So they have to do
not at all
desperately whatever it is they can do to lie, cheat, steal, and get, maintain their minority rule, despite the fact that, otherwise they shouldn't be able to.
Right. Well, that's increasingly an issue that they have, no question, because if you look at what's their primary problem this fall, Donald Trump has driven the Republican Party away from voting. He spends every day telling them that the voting is rigged, that we don't even really have a country anymore, that and that unless you put these MAGA primary people in. And by the way, a lot of them are going to lose the primaries, which is going to reinforce this rigged mentality that they have. Because and if they do win the primary, because it's all front loaded by the same jackasses that have been following him around the country, they're never going to win in the general. They're we have purity test issues on our side as well. And the reality is that Bernie Sanders, bless his heart, for all the the positive nature of his ideals, has a 30% ceiling in the country. End of story. There is no situation, just like Ron Paul. Ron Paul has an incredibly virulent support group.
Right. Oh, we lost. Hal just dropped. I don't know why Hal just dropped. So unfortunately, he's. Well, hopefully we'll get him back soon. I guess maybe he went through a bad sell or something. So that's why Hal dropped off the call. So we're gonna. I was gonna play Hal Hypocrite of the Week, but we'll wait a second on that as well. Oh, there we go. Hal's back.
Sorry. Yes, I lost you. Sorry, I was Stuttering John called in, and then my phone freaked out because I forgot to put on Do Not Disturb, as you do. Right.
Nice.
So what I was saying essentially was that not only the Republicans a dwindling party as far as population and group, but the reality is that even the voters they have, which are splintered and divisive. I mean, like I just did a clip on my show at infotainmentwars.com tonight. The last clip I did was Matt Gaetz on Tucker Carlson, and 100% of the time they were attacking Kevin McCarthy, other Republicans, not sufficiently America first crowd. It's all like that MAGA or nothing. And right. So they have, as much as we have our folks that, want to just turn blue districts bluer and don't understand that the mansions of the world have to exist or you're a minority party in the world. Those are fewer in the Democratic Party because there's a lot more pragmatists. Right. I mean, we can afford to have pragmatists. And you can argue that's how Biden got elected, because he attracted independent pragmatists. He's got the Democratic pragmatists, and everybody else knows that the alternative is a minority party full of lunatics. And when you're an adult, as I often say, one of our primary Sparksisms is if you are ever confronted with a decision that is between the lesser of two evils, always choose less evil.
Right.
The only adult thing to do, if you're like, well, I could choose. No. If one of these things is going to be the resulting win, then that's it. You choose the less evil of the two, because that's what you do when you have children, adults, pets you care about, grandparents who might lose their Social Security. I mean, Rick Scott literally put out this plan that they're going to sunset every law on the books every 5 years, basically to guarantee they can stop any law they want because they believe in this rotating cycle of administration. They're counting on the alternating midterms to get them, in a position where they can just filibuster or flatline any law they don't like. Violence Against Women Act, out. The tax code, gone. Start from scratch. And they won't allow it to move forward, so you bankrupt the country.
Right.
Everything but the military, and then ultimately Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, any welfare program that they don't like, they allow it to sunset while they're in charge, and if they lose power, they protect themselves by basically filibustering it or doing an anonymous hold when they're in. It's that simple. I mean, that's the plan for the ultimate destruction of every legal protection we have in every aspect of the country. This is who they are. They're not messing around anymore because they can't. They have to be extreme or they won't get to the front. They're like the Kardashians of politics. Unless it's flashy and pornographic, nobody's going to pay any attention because there's no substance. And the Democrats might wrestle with tactical responses to a substantive question, but that's what adults do.
Yeah, and rolling back a little bit to the point you made about like Bernie for like on the people on the left, or Bernie's part of I think his issues and they happened in 2016 and 2020 was that
right.
he didn't campaign in the South. Like I live in Louisiana, I didn't see I saw some people who were like, "Yay, I love Bernie." And I've been sharing stuff from Bernie Sanders for forever because I like some of the things that he says, and when he says it, I share it because hey, back when he had a 4% name recognition, I was one of those people who was like, yeah, I know him, he's a good guy. He talks about some good things and he makes a lot of great points.
Yeah.
But back in 2016, his biggest unforced error was he didn't pay attention to how Barack Obama defeated Hillary Clinton in the primaries, because when Barack Obama in 2008 ran against Hillary Clinton, he started winning all of the southern delegates. And at the first I was like, why is he focusing on southern states? He's never going to win those states, so why is he focusing on them? Reason is because a delegate in the South is worth the same thing as a delegate in the North. And so he scooped up all of these votes. And not only did he scoop up all those votes, but it may have helped him do things like win North Carolina, something that I never expected him to do. So here's a playbook written by Barack Obama on how to defeat Hillary Clinton in a primary, and Bernie Sanders goes, nah, I'm fine. The Democrats in the South are Southern Democrats, so they're conservative. And I'm like, no, there's a huge voting block.
Here's the problem, though. Here's the issue that he has, though, is that if he courts those people, he loses his base because it's a purist base. Barack Obama didn't have that problem. Weren't going after him.
A big chunk of the Southern Democratic Party are black voters, though. So if he could have just simply have gone out,
but they're not there.
If they could have, simply explained to them how his policies would affect them, and he's kind of like a rising tide raises all ships things, and they're like, yeah, but that still means if we're anchored, we're going to get sunk. And he didn't explain to them why.
That voting bloc leans more conservative than some of the other ones. It's why, it's one of the reasons why Biden got that vote, because they are realists and pragmatists. They are not pie in the sky. There are activists, like people like Nina Turner and other places, people like that, but they are absolutely not the base of the black vote, especially in the South. They've been through too much stuff to try stuff that's, untested or, any of that. They are going for the wins they can count on. And that's why they pick who they pick a lot of times. They really do. And so Bernie was never going to win those people over. It won't happen. And unless it's a tested program and they set up his version of doing it in New York State, and he was governor of New York State, an enormous money-making state that they could trust. And then he was like, I'm going to do that with the country. Maybe there'd be a case for that. But but I'm telling you that you're talking about a 30%. It's the same human beings with a liberal bent as opposed to a conservative bent that go for Ron Paul. It's, if Ron Paul supporters who believe in Social Security are Bernie supporters, essentially. And the ones who don't. Yeah.
But when he did try to explain why he didn't go after the Southern Democrats, right. And they're all like, he basically called everyone in the South who's a Democrat a Dixiecrat, and a lot of the elected black officials were like,
right,
sorry, you've just lost us, and then he never did anything, and he tried to do the same thing in 2020 and expected different results. And all the Bernie supporters were like, why can't you support Bernie? I was like, if he wins the primary, sure, I'll support him, but he has to win the primary, and he can't, because he's not doing what he needs to do. It's an unforced error on his part, in my mind. And if you can't figure out how to do that, you're not going to figure out how to win the general election.
Yeah, right. And that's where the 30% ceiling comes from, because convincing people of greater ideas takes more, great claims take, great evidence. And a lot of people take a lot more convincing in those areas. You have to be aware of that. There's no shame in it. You just have to be willing to explain your program 40 times. Like when I tell a joke, when I'm on tour in certain parts of the country, the premise is self-evident.
Right.
Right. But in some areas, I got to teach them history for them to even get the premise. And some audiences will resent somebody being too clever for them. It happens all the time. It's a very natural part of regional comedy, right? You just have to deal with it. And the problem is if you've got to be willing to put that talk time in on the terms of the people you're talking to. I have to I don't change the punchline. I don't change the ethic or the meaning or the moral of the joke, but I will change the languaging of it so that the audience I am talking to gets it. Because when in France, speak French. And that's, and that's one of the things and that's one of the problems that Bernie has, unfortunately, is that's seen as a betrayal by the hardcore supporters. And without the hardcores, because they're the essence of that 30%, he goes nowhere. And they will turn tail faster than any group in the world. They are disloyal, unreliable, and often either puritanical or petty. And they are, it's like courting Quakers, man. You cannot, you can't step off the res or you're done for. They might as well be Amish in their attitude towards, people's, not just their programs, but how they communicate the program. That's the essence. It isn't that he's got the wrong programs and that he couldn't find a way to communicate them to the country as a whole. And eventually somebody, him or somebody else, couldn't bring those things across the finish line. But the fact that his supporters won't hear of it a lot of times, if you try to craft the message so it's understood by other people, which they see as watering it down, gets them in a lot of trouble. Nina Turner's ads in Cleveland, I have family there. So I was there when she was running last time. Her ads looked more centrist establishment than anybody else's. She tried this. The problem is she didn't try it on the stump. Her team built those ads. But when she was questioned on the stump, she couldn't not be a purist. And so she pulled with one hand and pushed with two. And that's where she ran dry. That was the end of it. And that'll always be the issue that he's going to have. As long as Bernie's supporters insist on linguistic purity or some sort of puritanical view of how you describe, operate, or tactically put forward the programs, it'll stop a greater crowd of people from appreciating the ideas, and it will, as far as the general electorate, and it will absolutely capsize the general, or his internal group that keeps him afloat.
Right.
It's just the reality of it. It's just, and it's all communication and the respect for, the irony that we talk about diversity in the country right now, and I think it's a great thing that we need more of. But what I see in the extremes of both parties, I would not say both sides do it, but I would say the radicals on both sides do it, is their version of diversity is find someone that thinks like you think already, that looks like you, looks different than you.
Right.
So they look, find a person of color that sounds like you. That's not diversity. That's not listening and hearing and expanding the acceptability of programs and stuff like that. That's just creating an echo chamber of Benetton.
Right. Now, one of the things with the extremists, though, like one of the other things that I found, and especially during this last election, was you had they're so stuck on like the things that they want, they don't understand that what they might get is so close to what they want, the difference is negligible. Like, for example, I'd be fine with Medicare for all, but if you look at Biden's plan, where you have a public where he wants to have a public option where you pay in with your tax dollars and you offset what you pay via your tax code, and so it almost ends up being the same thing, but because it's not quote Medicare for all, it's a problem. And they're like, well, why won't Biden support Medicare for all instead of his public option? I'm like, because if you look at the polling data, his plan polls better than Medicare for all. Because Medicare for all polls great. I'm like, yes, it does. But the Biden plan polls even better. Why the hell would Joe Biden change from his plan that polls better to a plan that doesn't poll as well?
90%?
Yeah.
Right, to something that polls at 70%. And then if you tell people that Medicare for all eliminates private insurance, which it does, that's the single biggest difference materially between other variations, is that you don't get Medicare for all and maintain private insurance. If you tell people that, it drops to 20%.
Right.
The assumption is, for a lot of people, that Medicare for all means a buy-in like single payer. You can buy into Medicare. That's what they think. Right. Everybody can get it if they're poor. Everybody can get it if they're, if they're elderly. But if you want to buy into it as as an insurance plan, you can buy into it. That's what a lot of people in those polls specifically that everybody cites, that's what they think. Whether, and it's not their fault that they think that. It might not even be the fault of Bernie and the Medicare for all crowd, but that's what they think. And if it's wrong, you have to correct them. Otherwise, but they don't, because they benefit from the false assumption from the polling. That poll gives them a lot of wiggle room in the conversation. My idea polls it, almost 2/3 of the country or almost 3/4 of the country supports it, right? Until you're honest about it, and then it polls less than 1/5, and then you're dead, right? If you're selling any of this stuff, it's a long walk uphill. All this stuff is. Look how hard it was to get the ACA done, and all Biden wants to do is put in a single payer, which, by the way, is both the thing that polls at 90% and the thing that polls at 70%.
Right.
It can get done.
The whole difficulty that it was to pass the ACA, and I covered that. I had a very short-lived with a friend of mine radio show where I did things like, I went to a Tea Party rally and was trying to interview people, and I had this older woman like, I don't want government putting its hands on my Medicare. I'm like, what?
Right.
Government is Medicare. And then
madness.
But recently, there was a bunch of people were like, well, why didn't they do X, Y, and Z when they had 2 years to do so between 2009 and when Scott Brown took office? And I'm like, you don't understand when all this stuff happened. Comedian from SNL that was the North Dakotan senator that I'm blanking on. You know what I'm talking about.
I think so.
Yeah. He didn't even get put into office, because there was a problem.
Right. Al Franken. Al
Franken didn't even get to office until July. He was elected in November. Wasn't actually took the oath of office until July of that year. Then you had to get the Pennsylvania Republican to flip to become a Democrat just to get the 60 votes, and then you're at the magical 60 vote. Well, now you have to herd cats and get every single Democrat to agree with you, which causes every Democrat, including the conservative ones like Louisiana's conservative Democrat Senator Mary Landrieu, to be like, well, if I'm going to vote for this, what am I going to get in return in order to get this passed? And then you have to start horse trading, and it's The idea that everything that was done was so simple.
It's even worse than that. The funny thing is you see this a lot, when people are like the ACA polls very well, and or like even Obama's polling around the ACA, what was upside down, and you went 60% of people are against the ACA at one point, and it's obviously won people over time by being effective in quality governing. But in the beginning, it was like people don't like it. Well, half of that, besides the Republicans who are entrenched and think it's communism, half of that is people who who wanted the single payer, thought it didn't go far enough that way, or wanted Medicare for all. It didn't mean they were against the bill, but it polled negatively because they thought it should have gone farther, which means they're technically for it and something. They're for it plus.
Yeah, I have a video on that from way back in the day where it might even be on a different YouTube channel where it was like, of the people who opposed it, chop out the people that opposed it because it wasn't liberal enough. You have a majority of people who either support the Affordable Care Act or want something more progressive.
Exactly. And the problem is that, the Jill Stein voters, the nose holders, the people who, stomp their feet and say shit like we need to hold their feet to the fire, which is a torture reference, which has always creeped me out. You know what I mean? That's literally from the Spanish Inquisition, hold their feet to the fire. Right. And from that, they do that from day one. After the thing, like they get in and they start getting it passed, they're like, well, now we got to hold their feet to the fire. Well, that just says to the Republicans, like, all we have to do is keep these guys from getting everything they want, and we don't have to give them anything they want, because these people will back us. And that's what the Susan Sarandons of the world did. They literally ran against Democrats and were basically like, maybe we just need Trump to destroy the place so we can start from scratch. And that their argument ultimately was that very thing, was that, they're not for it, and if the other side, your opponent, can weaponize your own side, your own team against itself simply by denying you 1/16, 1/3 of what you're shooting for.
Right.
You are doing their job for them. And that's abundantly clear. That's how we got Trump in the first place. That's what that was.
Yeah, especially because there was
75,000 votes in 3 states.
Right, exactly. There was the study that was done. It's on NPR's website where they looked at they looked at votes, like 50,000 voters that they looked at, and basically 12% of the people in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania who voted Bernie in the primaries voted for Trump in the general election. And if those people would have just voted Jill Stein or just stayed home because they didn't like it, then Hillary would have won. But that's not what happened. So
or any of the people who left it blank, or voted Jill Stein, even though which weighted the vote and kept it out of Hillary's corner in the areas that were tipping towards Electoral College. Right. And again, all the Republicans had to do was keep the Democrats from getting everything they want to keep them from getting anything they want.
Right.
And that's, if you're part of the process that sets that up, you're nothing more than a political saboteur, and every ethical argument you ever make is just garbage, because it can't have any meaning, because and again, this day and age especially, I personally believe in a civil society, in a modern society like ours, revolution, the phrase itself, is the 6-minute abs of democracy. It's, you know what I mean? It's a lap band instead of, getting your stomach stapled, instead of actually, doing anything to change your diet and exercise plan and working to, change the system on a way that's sustainable, one that will not only will work, but will stay. It won't get overturned. Then we get in these like back and forths with executive orders, and that's how we're going to rule. Especially when, like I said, things like the ACA are effectively nationwide no-brainers. They poll incredibly well. The people are for them. It's a really simple pitch because you go, look, we have public schools and private schools. We have cops and we have private security. You know, why can't you have public insurance and private insurance?
Right.
You know, and here's an even better one. There was a seed of this in the ACA, which is brilliant, and if it had just moved forward, would be amazing. That states, if you could buy, once these triggers happened where insurance companies are, putting too much towards profit and all that stuff, which happened repeatedly, and has already crossed that line. Once that happens, if you want to technically, beyond the public option from a state, or I mean the federal version, if it existed at all, let's say Massachusetts, is able to sell across state lines like a regular insurance company would be.
Right.
Then you could buy into, instead of, just, getting Blue Cross Blue Shield, you could buy the Massachusetts single payer plan. And instead of paying profits into a company, that isn't going to do anything good, you would pay into into a state that would use it to build their infrastructure or schools or their own, shore up their pensions for their workers, or put more police or firemen or whatever on the street, like that kind of stuff. Right.
Right.
And then you go, okay.
That's one of the lies of the Republican Party, is that insurance companies don't currently sell insurance across state lines. They do. They just create legal fictions to do so. Like Blue Cross Blue Shield sells in many states.
Right. They just have to create a Blue Cross of Kansas,
right, and
a Blue Cross, and then they firewall it, and then they kind of, pretend like the corporate overlap isn't there, and then they have, since it's all they're a family of companies that are all under one corporate, structure. That if you buy stock in them, you're buying stock in all of them, not just, the one in Kansas, and that's how they get around it.
Right.
The curious part is, let's say you get Massachusetts and they can start selling across state lines, and it's great. You're happy with it. You love it. And then Washington State starts their own, and California starts their own for their own citizens. So as individual states, you can buy into these programs, and as if you live there. And then if you live in Massachusetts or something like that, or you live in these states that you can use yours. Or if you go, ours isn't run as well as the California one. They take too much out, and I don't like what the governor's doing. So I'm going to switch. I'm going to buy into the Washington one, and then that'll affect who's running for office, because it becomes almost a CEO question as far as people buying into the state system. So if you put some authoritarian anti-abortion nudnik in there, you might lose some of your customer base to Washington State or Massachusetts or something like that. And then each state, that creates their own can work on their own, quality of care. They can work on what services they provide, what level of, the cheapness of it, any number of things. But ultimately, the money just goes into the infrastructure of those states, which ultimately helps the country as a whole.
Right.
And that was in the ACA as a potential. It's still, the seed is still there. It can still be done. The states just have to set those systems up.
It just makes too much sense. It just makes too much sense.
Right. Right. And that's why, and the problem with California, they were pushing their, a Medicare for all kind of system, and that got shut down because it was too all encompassing and shut down insurance in the state. So they were like, well, maybe a single payer version of that. And then the very people who backed the Medicare for all thing are basically like all or nothing. So we're done. Never mind.
And that's something else,
madness.
Though, that
like
you said earlier, something about, Republicans deny, the Democrats one thing. And that's one of the things that Republicans are really good at, is that, they will be like, oh, the Democrats are in control. Let's block everything that they're trying to do, and then convince everybody it's the Democrats' fault that they can't get anything ddone. And enough people are like, oh, well, maybe they're right. Just come on.
Exactly.
A modicum of brain cells.
Or you run up. I mean, the big thing that they do is run up a shit ton of debt and then blame it on the people who are there when it has to be paid. They run up a bar tab. They drink like sailors, and then when Democrats get in, they have to balance the budget. I mean, Biden lowered the deficit, last year, the biggest amount in history. At the same time he raised employment. So, and this idea that like the economy sucks because of any particular, thing that Biden is doing, as opposed to we just came out of a pandemic. There's a huge supply shock going on. Demand is rising because people have money in their pockets, but not off scale. Not, people aren't running around going, dude, we've all got $50,000 in our account. I don't even know where this goes. Like Venezuelans, wiping their ass with their own money. It's not that situation. That's what Fox wants you to think. That's what the argument is, but it's nowhere near true.
Now on Hal Sparks Mega Worldwide, infotainmentwars.com, you had mentioned something about, it was, if I'm getting right, how, if you go back to like periods of inflation where you see prices of everything spiking, and you can correct me if I'm wording this incorrectly, but that it many times, if not every time, goes, and what goes along with oil price getting spiked. Is that correct?
Yep. Within 2 years beforehand. Yes. Within 2 years beforehand, whenever that happens, whenever we've experienced inflation or a massive inflationary pressures, it's always because of a massive spike in oil prices or a lack of supply. So since World War II.
Professor Sparks, I did my homework. So in 1973 was the start of the Arab oil embargo. Oil rose 200% between 73 and 74. Between 73 and 74. In 73, the inflation was 8.7. In 74, the inflation was 12.3. In 1979, the Iranian oil revolution took place, and in 1980, the Iran-Iraq war started. Oil went up by 67%. Inflation was 13.3 and 12.5% respectively in those 2 years. In April 2020, oil was at $21 a barrel. By the end of the year, it had gone up to $90 a barrel, a 350% increase. Inflation went from 1.4% in 2020 to 7% in 2021. So there's 3 examples of why you were right.
Yes, I am right. And the embarrassing part of this is there may be some sort of Volcker idea around, too much money supply causes inflation, like Venezuela or some shit like that, even though their stuff had to do with oil prices too, because they leveraged their entire economy on the price of oil. Derp. But even beyond that, they, regardless of those, every single time we have put, we've gone through since World War II anyways, like you could argue that there was, when we were starting the currency, I don't know, post-Civil War, that there might have been inflationary pressures due to the amount of paper floating around. But like since in the world of like credit default swaps and the repo market and bond yields and all that kind of stuff, the complexity of our economic system and the fact that we are the trading stable currency of the earth. Forget petrodollar and eurodollar. They're the same thing. Right. The reason countries exchange between, the middleman currency between their currency and somebody else's is because we're the trusted one. We're the one that you can go, it's going to stay where it is. It doesn't fluctuate all over the place. And in the case of like the yuan, the Chinese Communist Party can't just go, you know what, it's worth double today. You know what, it's worth half. Like the Saudis with drinking, like we just changed the rules today, right? And ours doesn't work like that. The reason it works so well is because it's complicated. Because the Fed measures against central banks, and the regional payouts in the bond market and all that kind of stuff, that complexity stabilizes it largely. And our dollar, the funny thing is if this was monetary inflation, if this was inflation caused by the overprinting of dollars, the dollar wouldn't be worth shit right now. It would be, trading at 60 cents against the euro or something like that. The dollar is still the strongest currency on earth right now. And the yuan is devaluing against it. They don't want it to, but it is. The Chinese need to artificially prop up their currency just the way the Russians do with the ruble. But they can't. They don't have any material ability to do it because their system's so screwed. So the fascinating part is, if we were experiencing monetary inflation, that Yeah, that was my cat.
Yeah.
Knocking over glass. Hi, buddy. If we were experiencing...
Cats are assholes. I love my cats, but they're assholes.
He's fantastic. Thanks, buddy. I got to clean that up now so you don't get something in your paws. I had to go move him across the room. I'll surround it and then I'll clean it up after we're done. Nice. But if we've been printing money ridiculously, if there's a lot of something, it's worth less, right? That's the general idea. That's almost true of anything. And so inflation, as we understand it, we talk about sometimes the markets and they talk about it differently than the news does. The news often talks about inflation and deflation in terms of commodities and groceries and stuff. It goes up and then it goes down. Okay, right. That's not inflation. Inflation is a constant, never-ending expansion of the cost of making money by about 2%, because that's the interest on making more money. And as more people show up and more stuff is there to buy, you need more money out there to do it, and therefore it goes up in price a little bit. So prices just climb. So it was a cup of coffee was a nickel in the 30s, and now it's $5, from a Starbucks. But at the same time, back then, an hourly wage was 15 cents. And now an hourly wage is $15. And so the $5 and the 5 cents are basically the same, right, as far as your life experience, how much work you're putting in, what part of your day it eats up to create that amount of money. That's inflation. That's really inflation.
Now, we do have a bunch of shout outs for Chip in the chat. So in the YouTube chat. So
yes.
Hey, everyone's saying hey to Chip.
That smash was Chip.
Yes.
So the 15, let's say, everybody watched Trading Places, I have no doubt, and I know you know the movie as much as I do, and I love it.
Yes.
And in that movie, they talk about a couple of commodities that trade all the time that you kind of take for granted, but it's an enormous part of the economy. One of them, of course, is frozen concentrated orange juice. Right? And the idea is there was this crop report they were waiting for to see if the frost was going to affect production. And if the frost was going to affect production, there were going to be fewer oranges and the price was going to go up. And if they knew this before anybody else, they could buy everything before the bell, before they announce it, and then and they get it cheap. And then as soon as people heard that there's not going to be as many oranges, they'd start buying oranges like crazy, and then they could sell it at a high price. Buy low, sell high. That was it.
Right.
And the problem was they switched the paper, and it was the exact opposite. And the price, they sold at the beginning, right, and then bought after. That's how Billy Ray and Lewis won. Right. Like a short's a little different. But they sat on it. It's commodities, but it's the same kind of principle.
Right. So
in doing that, the price of that from the first part to the second part, that's not inflation. In that, from the stock report reading to the price on the other side, that wasn't inflation or deflation.
Right.
That is simply supply and demand, availability of stuff. That's the cost of that thing right now. It didn't mean the cost of frozen concentrated orange juice was going to be that price forever. As a matter of fact, next year there might have been a frost, which meant there was fewer oranges in the world, right? And it did affect the price that way. That's not inflation. It never has been. It never will be. It has to do with if there's a hurricane and like fucking Glenn Beck. Oh my God. So we did a Glenn Beck clip and he's talking about this nonsense. And Glenn Beck starts talking about how there's going to be a chlorine shortage for pools.
I heard that.
So if you've got a pool, right? So if you got a pool, you're gonna have a hard time finding chlorine. And he wanted this. The overarching belief is, and what his viewers think, is that Biden is responsible for all this. And it's the world economy, but it's basically the Fed is sabotaging it. And then he gets down to it. What was it caused by? 2 years ago, Hurricane Laura knocked over the biggest chlorine plant in the United States, and then it can't make chlorine.
Right.
And guess what? The Biden administration came in, gave more funds to the states in the rescue package to fix things like this, and the factory that they are building to replace it is bigger and will produce more than the one that existed. You know what that's going to do to the price of chlorine as it was before that? It's going to temporarily go down because a hurricane knocked it over, and then it's going to drop the price of chlorine in the United States going forward.
Right.
And that's not inflation or deflation. That's availability of supply. And I do not understand why these people continue to talk like this, because everybody just thinks we printed a bunch of money to stimulate the economy. That's it.
In a lot of my discussions, especially with conservatives, though, they often just don't understand. They'll argue all day long and try and make themselves seem like, oh, we're Republicans, we're better on the economy, but they don't even understand how supply and demand works. Like, I don't know if they've even taken an Econ 101 course or whatever. Like, they don't get it. They don't get supply and demand.
No. And yet they are supply side economics. From a political standpoint, that's their purpose. Their economics are supposedly based on supply and demand. If you want a product, you should be able to buy it on the open market. And if people want to pay more for it, they should have to pay more. You can get whatever price you can get for that thing. And if somebody else makes a better one, they should be able to outpace you. That's the argument, right? Every single time.
Well, it's one of the things
none of them.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just saying, none of them. It's not politically expedient. It doesn't help them, because the problem is you can't blame somebody for that except business, and they don't want to do that, or reality, like Hurricane Laura. And so, it sounds like an excuse to them, and they don't like that. They want to blame the government for this thing that is totally out of, notice how the government doesn't create jobs until Trump's in office, and then every job that's created is his magic wave of the hand. And then as soon as he's out of office and jobs start going back up, people are like, the government doesn't create jobs. Biden's actually stopping job growth. Like, okay.
Well, one of the things I find is that the Republicans and conservatives love to just pleasure themselves with the invisible hand. But
right,
they
sit
have,
on
they
it
have
first
this one,
and stranger. I get it.
On abortion issues, I think one of the arguments that they make on abortion, they'll try and argue, oh well, Planned Parenthood goes into neighborhoods and targets black babies to be killed or something like that. And that's something that they really believe. And I'm like, the reason you believe that is because you've bought into the myth of that supply side economics works. You believe that if you build it, they will come theory of all things economics, where no, Planned Parenthood, just like any other business, is going to go where there is demand for their overall services. Not
already.
If there's demand for a Planned
Parenthood,
Parenthood,
or there's a gap,
and not just abortion for Planned Parenthood,
where there's a gap in services.
Right, because that's another thing they don't want to get.
Fertility, prenatal, especially the prenatal aspect of it. One of the reasons why you see more Planned Parenthoods in poor and impoverished and minority neighborhoods is because they have higher infant mortality because they lack prenatal care.
Right.
And that in and of itself actually saves more babies' lives than are ever aborted at any of these places.
Well, because they don't actually want to solve the problem. They just want to punish people for getting abortions. If when Jeb Bush was governor of Florida, he partially defunded Planned Parenthood, and which caused Planned Parenthood to close in certain counties, and in certain counties, Planned Parenthood was the only one providing prenatal care. So you just immediately took away access to prenatal care and also to prevention of pregnancies. And during the remaining time of the tenure of Jeb Bush in Florida, the abortion rate in Florida went up. Meanwhile, on the other hand, when John Hickenlooper was governor of Colorado, they gave out universal access to free access to contraception, IUDs, etc., ways to prevent pregnancy, and abortion rates went down in the state. So I was like, I'm always telling conservatives, if you want to actually solve the problem of ending abortions that you feel is the problem, I mean, I'm pro-choice 100%, no exceptions, whatever. But if you really feel like reducing the amount of abortions is very important to you, then if you want to actually do that, you need to elect liberals to enact their policies, not just punish the people who you think are acting sexually immorally.
Right. Well, and again, that's the interesting part about it, because it really boils down to sort of a nanny state of their own that they won't cop to. Because isn't that really what's going on? Aren't they socially engineering the very thing that they supposedly are against, and think that the government does it? The government should stay out of your business and into her business. up in her business.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Government should be so small that it fits into a vagina.
Yeah, that it's basically it's an IUD with a broodmare clause.
Right.
So that and again, you're right. That goes to sort of the them not understanding that like somebody like an organization like Planned Parenthood will move into an area because there are more children being born with birth defects, more women dying in childbirth, more malnourished and preemies and that kind of stuff. Things that you can actually solve fairly simply. And then they're like, they're always in these areas where it's, Tony Robbins used to have this thing about like, there was the analogy he used a bunch was about the garbage strike in New York at one point. And New York, because of the garbage strike, had this huge rat problem. It's enormous. And he was like, most people look at their problems like they would look at the garbage and go, look at all this garbage these rats brought.
Right.
That they invert the causal relationship to the actual problem instead of taking primary responsibility for it.
Right.
And that's effectively what these guys are doing. It's what they that's the only thing they really they need to socially manipulate this. They have some elements of pious Christianity that they have to virtue signal, which is ironic because people do realize that evangelical churches are literally virtue signaling airports. That's what they're for. You fly in and virtue signal. Your hat is a symbol of your virtue. The way you hold your hands up in praise, the notes you hit in the hymns, how quick you are to give money. It is literally, that's what that is. I mean, even your presence there. No one needs a church to pray. Nobody needs a minister to explain to them if they can read what's in the Bible or the Quran or the Torah or any of that stuff. But you go there to show the community that these are your values too. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's what it is. You can't pretend that it ain't. And the irony is, I do with like Kenneth Copeland's Flashpoint channel. I'll do clips from their thing occasionally. Mm-hmm. And at one point I was joking of doing, Hal Sparks Mega Church Worldwide, where I do a sermon, by one of these people, just do their whole sermon to kind of break it down. Right. And I have a personal aversion to interrupting prayer, no matter even whether I believe it's sincere or not. So that's the one thing I'm trying to find a workaround in. Either I skip past it, I'll do it early, but if I do it live, I'm going to have to sit there with my head bowed, like in respect. It's just who I am. But in that process, you recognize that these folks, they go to these places to do the very thing they mock, blue-haired liberals marching for women's rights for doing.
Right.
Right. It's all virtue signaling. That's what this is. That's what it is. It's it's Our Lady of the Virtue Signal.
Pretty much. So let's see. So every week or most weeks, I like to do a bit that's called Hypocrite of the Week. So I'm going to play that real quick, and then we can. It'll lead us on to two more. It'll lead on to two more topics, about 30 seconds. So hold on.
This week's Hypocrite of the Week is Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who tweeted Elon Musk's offer to buy Twitter is a good deal for shareholders and raises the prospect that the platform will be a place where free speech can thrive, not a tool for narrative enforcement. This is, of course, after Florida Governor Ron DeSantis took punitive action against Disney for them daring to voice a negative opinion over one piece of legislation. To see who next week's Hypocrite of the Week will be, tune in to Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left, that's right. Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Central on blogtalkradio.com/liberaldan.
So there's two things there. There's the whole Elon Musk thing in Twitter, which maybe we'll get to or whatever. But there's also the whole DeSantis thing with, the punitive, Disney speaks out eventually against one bill that they disagree with. And DeSantis is like, no, you can't speak badly against me. I will come back and vanquish thee. And like one of the things that amused me early on in it with his attempts the passing of the thing that removes the Reedy Creek Development District is that one of the side effects, if it's actually legal, which it may not be for them to do, because
Right.
there's a bond issue that has to be
It
brought
isn't.
up. But if you're raising the property taxes of possibly up to $2,200 per household just to own the libs, well, there's 73,000 Trump voters in Osceola County and 245,000 Trump voters in Orange County. How are they going to feel when DeSantis has just raised their tax bill by $2,200 so they can own
you don't
the libs
understand.
on one?
Oh wait, it's even better. You know, you have to understand that is a they can just look at that as a DeSantis 2024 campaign donation, because this is all for show anyways.
Right.
And so they're helping him. It's almost like they're contributing to a commercial for him. He's going to use this in everything, right? I took on Disney and their woke ideology. I was the one who fought the groomers. I can court the QAnons and the Trump maggots, and that's that all. They're going to pay $2,200 in taxes and just consider it a campaign donation.
Right.
Whether they want it or not is different. It's just kind of a forced campaign donation. But hey, you live in Florida, it takes you a chance.
And the thing is that, you know, I'm sure when the courts eventually rule against it, because the Constitution of the United States and the Florida Constitution and Florida law all basically say that you cannot change the bonds or how, you know, the municipality.
Right.
You can't just tank the municipality that's controlling the bonds. So either the state of Florida would have to like pay off the bonds immediately, like that's $1 billion right there, or they have to wait till like 2020, 2029, I think, to go against
have
that.
a referendum.
So again, it's all theater. It's all just political theater to try and say that, oh, well, we are fighting these groomers of Disney World. But I've often believed that, you know, the people that are the loudest about the, you know, what they feel is sexual immorality or sex crimes or whatever.
Oh my God!
Typically, the people that are ones that are doing it the most. Like I once, I was on my honeymoon back in 2007, and our senator at the time was Senator David Vitter in Louisiana, and he was always big about moral morality. He very much Bill Clinton should have resigned because he had an affair. You know, that he was very vocal about that, and his wife even was like, if I found David had cheated on me or done what Bill Clinton had done, Lorena Bobbitt would have been tame for what I would do to David Vitter.
Right.
I wake up one morning from just overnight or whatever, just one morning, wake up on my honeymoon, I'm on a cruise, but the news is playing in the background, and as I'm waking up, I'm hearing something about David Vitter and a hooker, and I'm like, what did I just hear? I'm
and diapers.
I looked at my wife.
Like,
did
it wasn't
did
even.
you just hear that? Did you just hear? Like, did David Vitter give me one of the greatest wedding gifts that I could have gotten? That because I'm going to talk about this forever. And
totally.
I was all day long. I was like, I need to find a TV. I need to find that news again. And so I was finding ways to just kind of. I need to go back to the room for a second. I finally saw it. I was like, yes, David Vitter was found. You know, that he had improper relationships with hookers. Now, here on Liberal Day Radio, I am sex positive. Sex work is real work, and it should be legalized. But I'm also going to expose hypocrisy whenever I see it. And so many times, serious sinner David Vitter was the hypocrite of the week way back then. But like now, when they're talking about grooming, you know, anybody who doesn't know this already, Republican Representative John Rose, look at how he found his wife. I think they met when she was 17.
Oh, yeah.
So talk about grooming.
Yeah.
You can't come to me and talk to me about Democrats supporting groomers. John Rose is a groomer in your own party.
Look at Dennis Hastert, longest sitting House Speaker in history. Dennis Hastert, Republican, has been paying off his victims, or was until he passed away. Had been for the last, since he left, essentially. And the Republicans were just like pretended like they didn't A, know, and B, just hide it from everybody for the entirety of the time. It's insane.
Right.
Like these folks, and again, it's one of those things where you're like, the piety aspect is one thing. It's not that he had an affair, a la Bill Clinton, which is,
right.
Somebody's in the office, you guys are flirting, one thing leads to another. Human beings are cut from a special kind of stuff. That's life, any of that. It's diapers. It's like, it's a fetish that in many ways, would trigger an embarrassment reflex for a lot of people, which whatever, do you. I'm not here to yuck anybody's yum. Right. But the idea that this dude, that's what he's hiding. He's not hiding the fact that he's having what would effectively be run-of-the-mill, run-ins with prostitution for a sense of variety in his sex life. This dude is doing, infant play. God knows what that is rooted in. Yeah. And does that. And as a voter, should I be concerned that his feelings about himself and others isn't directly tied to that kind of behavior, that he makes judgments based on that kind of thing. That's the concern. Again, it can be fine. Doesn't mean he's a bad guy. Doesn't have to mean. But right. It might mean that he thinks everybody in the world's a baby, or everybody in the world's a naughty nanny, and they just have to wait for it to get out.
Yeah, but and people would often, especially conservatives, be like, well, how come you don't criticize Bill Clinton and you're criticizing David Vitter? I'm like, I'm holding David Vitter to the standard he set for himself. I hold Republicans to the standard that they set for themselves. If you're not going to make sexual morality a campaign platform, then I'm not going to worry about what you do in your sexual life. What happened between Bill and anybody else is between Bill and Hillary, and that's it. And it doesn't bother me any. If David Vitter hadn't made sexual morality a thing, hadn't criticized Bill Clinton for cheating, hadn't criticized his predecessor, who also was caught cheating, who was in line to be Speaker of the House. Louisiana would have been even more powerful with a Speaker of the House from that same congressional district, and he couldn't have it. Why? Because it was revealed that he too, Bob Livingston, was having an affair, and he had to resign. And he called him to resign. But when it came time for David Vitter to resign, did he resign? No. Larry Craig is another example. Very anti-LGBTQ, but what is he? He gets arrested for lewd conduct in a men's bathroom. His toe tapping across stall lines. Hypocrisy is a conservative prerequisite, and I'm not saying there are no hypocrites in the Democratic Party. I've called them out on the show many times, but hypocrisy is a. There's also degrees.
There's also degrees.
Yes.
That's the thing that we have to keep talking about. And in a world where we throw around the words evil and Nazi the way like a Valley girl would throw around like and totally, it removes the value of those words. They don't mean anything if you just keep tossing them at everybody you don't like.
Right.
And the same thing is true of hypocrisy. Like there's mild hypocrisy, and then there's overt, cruel, disgusting, violent hypocrisy that leads to damaged lives and devastated finances and ruined families.
Right.
And you have to be able to tell the difference, for God's sake. Otherwise, what does it mean at all? What is if everything's, if you paint with one color, then it's hard to distinguish what matters to you.
Right. And the other thing, moving on to, I guess, another subject is, we've had, the issues with Ukraine. And then, I was just, the amount of apologia, or the amount of times that conservatives have been promoting, pro-Putin propaganda is just shocking to me. They're really they're really showing what side they feel their bread is buttered. I mean, from Donald Trump praising Putin for being so smart in how he invaded Ukraine, to just tollers to conservative talk radio, basically repeating the same lie that it must have been a Ukrainian missile that hit that railroad station. And then you had the Rand Paul arguing with Blinken. And I have a little clip here.
For probably very good reasons.
You could also argue the countries they've attacked were part of Russia.
Well,
we're part of the Soviet Union.
Yes, and I firmly disagree with that proposition. It is the fundamental right of these countries to decide their own future and their own destiny. And
I'm not saying it's not, but I'm
important.
saying that the countries that have been attacked, Georgia and Ukraine, were part of the Soviet Union.
And that does not give
they were
Russia
part
the
of
right
the
to attack
Soviet
them.
Union since the 1920s.
But that does not give Russia the right to attack them. On the contrary,
No one's saying it does, but it
they were
really has
liberated
nothing to do
from being part of this empire by force.
He's like, no one is saying it does, but of course Rand Paul is saying that that's a reason. He's giving. I'm not justifying it, but here's the justification anyway. Like, come on, dude. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's
they
so
want to talk
lazy about how Democrats are traitors and treasonous. Meanwhile, they're doing Putin's work for him. So, yeah. Well.
Yeah.
But like Putin wouldn't have invaded Ukraine, they say, if Trump was still president. No, probably, maybe not. We don't know. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't see what's on Earth 2. We don't know what's in that alternate universe where Trump managed to win despite being so unpopular. But, you know, what we do know is that Putin didn't have to attack during Trump because Putin was given the world by Trump. He weakened NATO. He gave Trump more influence in the Middle East. He helped Russia and OPEC get over their oil price war to artificially restrict the supply of gasoline, which improved, you know, Russia's ability to earn money from oil that they sold. So Trump was the dream come true for Vladimir Putin. You know, the idea that Putin might have invaded Ukraine, but maybe that's true because he would have gotten more power in the region in other ways.
Well, no, the idea is that Trump was there for the tee-up, whether it had to be, you know, if it was 4 years of tee-up or 8 years of tee-up, that would give them the predicate they would need by undermining NATO, breaking down the alliance, you know, creating a situation where they, you know, nobody trusted anybody, where you could split Germany and France off perhaps from the rest of NATO, to, you know, to the point where if they did something, you know, and Russia started salami slicing its way across the nation, by the time they woke up, it would be too late. And any chance, you know, especially if Trump was running things, that he would request and or sign the military aid for Ukraine was ridiculous. He would have let them die on the vine. That was what he was there to do.
Right.
So again, it was a 4-year tee-up, and to give Russia basically a head start to get ready for their build-up and their push, drop NATO's pants, undermine the alliance, establish fissures between them, and then, you know, if he got another 4 years of Trump doing it, all the better. But if he didn't, then we just move. And it was always going to happen. There was no
Russia or in Ukraine.
Exactly.
They keep it. It's peacekeeping.
Right. Yeah. That was the idea. That originally the Donbass and the Crimea was because they needed it. Donbass and the Donetsk and Luhansk areas are because they needed a reason to keep Ukraine out of NATO. The way you do that is you give them a border dispute that's ongoing, and then they legally cannot join. Because that's part of the organizational founding document. And by the way, it's not just the right. I mean, Jimmy Dore and Russell Brand both have been carrying this water like crazy under the premise that they are, that they're liberal or progressive or both or neither. I don't know what those labels mean anymore to either of them. They're both gross.
Well, you had Jill Stein went to meet with Putin, right? I mean, so there are people on both sides that are terrible, but I mean, there's I guess there's much less, I would say. I guess it's a matter of amounts or of how many are, you know, of one side versus the other side are carrying that water.
Yeah, I mean, this is and it's extraordinary. Like, it goes on. Basically, Jimmy Dore, Max Blumenthal, Aaron Mate, and I guess Kurt Metzger, who's on Jimmy's show as well. They dug this well early, that they were going to push this neo-Nazi Azov battalion bullshit, and now they can't get out. So they're stuck. It's like people, like, you ever been stuck in the old stories, like you get stuck in an argument and then you realize you're wrong in the middle of it, but you just keep arguing to save face.
Right.
That's what they're doing.
I've heard of that. I mean,
Like,
I try
none
not
of
to do
this-
that personally, but I've heard of that. Yeah.
Me too.
Yes.
Yes, I've
more like
read.
this,
Yeah,
it's
I
like the sunk
recognize.
costs fallacy, where you keep investing in that company even though the price is tanking.
Right, or the greater fool, investment strategy in real estate, for example, which is what's going on in China right now.
Right.
You know that the real estate is worthless, but you're hoping that someone dumber than you comes along and buys it.
Yeah.
Like, I could sell this. I was a sucker, so there's got to be a sucker bigger than me.
Right.
And that's where they are. But they, again, they're still selling this. There's Nazis in Ukraine, and so they kind of deserve it thing. It's grotesque. Like I almost understand how you think you could get away with it before Putin attacked, before he actually did this. Once he does it, though, like you're in for a penny, in for a pound. But still, like it's like they're mass graves. Like this isn't even close. This is, and if the United States was doing this anywhere, they'd be the first ones to say this is American imperialism. It's disgusting. No war for oil. Blah 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 blah. But since it's Russia, somehow it gets a pass. Like what? How do you justify that? I don't know how they sleep at night. Honestly,
I don't either, and it's bizarre.
Yeah.
So what do you have? I haven't heard anything. I mean, I try and listen as much as possible to infotainmentwars.com.
Yeah.
Let's make it worldwide.
Thank
but
you.
I haven't really heard much of your opinions on what's going on with Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter. So
here's the thing. I think it's largely a nothing burger on a couple of fronts.
Right.
One is there is no way he's going to, say, bring Trump on and make the entire site about Trump from now on, because that's what it would do. For a year, that's what they would be dealing with. Trump's followers and Trump himself showing up there and just owning the place. It basically just roll out a red carpet and ruin it as a site. And you drive a bunch of people to the edges, and all you would get out of it is remnant Parler and Getter and Gab account people that would jump back over, which is what's happening. Those people are coming back. That's why there was a spike in people coming back, and right wing versus left wing.
Right.
And a lot of, there's a lot of bot killing and stuff. So the two things that he's pushing that I think will zero out most people's concerns if you really look at it. The first one is that he wants to verify everybody, either through a subscription service where if you subscribe and it costs you $5 a year or whatever to verify yourself, you're talking to real people. You're not talking to a sea of Russian bots or Macedonian hacker farms or Indian clickbait farms or any of that stuff. Right. You are, you're doing this. You're even if you're having an argument, at least it's a real argument. If you're dealing with some pig online, it's a real pig. Right. It's a real person who's a pig. And that's crucial. That's important. And that would eliminate a lot of, Trump's artificial support in general anyway, because that's what he had. He had an army of bots. That's what a bunch of these guys do. So once you eliminate the bots, these guys are kind of like they're alone. They're a minority party. Like you said, they don't have as many supporters. So they got to reinforce them with all these phony stuff. If you get rid of the phony stuff, they might be loud and annoying, but they don't have the troops to roll in and troll everybody like they used to. The other thing is that the real reason he's buying it is because he, like everybody else, has been doing the math on the metaverse.
Right.
And the metaverse itself is going to be the next free money frontier. You don't have to physically build stuff. You can get people coding in a corner, and it's as good as building a house from a financial standpoint. And right now, there's only a few ways in that are viable. First of all, there's the obvious one everybody talks about is Meta, because of Facebook's obvious try to jump in and get ahead. They're trying the 80-20 rule. They're trying to be Coca-Cola. Mm-hmm. They're trying to be the first in and own most of the market. And and while they're doing that, there are other people working on their own entry into it who might be more higher quality and might milk off that audience over time, largely game companies. So the second thing you could do is you could buy Microsoft, or you could buy Sony and own the PlayStation and own the Xbox, and that's your other way in. The other option, I suppose, if you want to build in the metaverse with the already existing entry levels, is Apple and Google. You, through the search engine window, you create, visual search engines where you go into the metaverse and you go into Google World where you can know everything all at once. And if you ask out loud for something, it'll show you it, and you can watch lectures on stuff at the same time you're learning about whatever topic you were trying to find information on. But he can't afford any of those.
Right.
You know what he can afford?
He can afford
Twitter. That's it. That's all it is. Twitter was the cheapest date in town. That is all it's about. It's all it'll ever be about. When he says he's going to add features, a big part of that is just driving towards eventually getting a metaverse window, and that he already controls a giant audience. And the problem is that, $44 million is cheap, because he could spend $50 million on a new social media website, name it, brand it, build it, do everything, just like Truth Social.
Right.
And nobody's going. Nobody's going to join Elon Musk's private subscription-only site in any mass, not the way that the Twitter guys are there. Like we're here. There's a huge audience of people on Twitter. So you just buy the audience. They're already in. And getting out, might feel emotionally like something, so people don't want to do that, so they either maintain their account or they'll upgrade and decide to try it, and they'll like it. Right. That's what he's counting on. That's all. I mean, it is not this, like, he's not going to allow snuff films and Stormfront to have an account. He's going to want to avoid a lot of the controversies that everybody's worried about, because it's a waste of time. He's a bit of a troll and a silly fent. Right. So he'll, he does he'll tweet song lyrics and all kinds of stuff like that. He actively tries to, create an atmosphere of just kind of irreverence, which is another word for not taking yourself too seriously and being fun. And that's crucial to first principles in a social media network. So even that is built on the same strategy he built Tesla and SpaceX on. Right. Because what is, Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, what is, as Hannibal Lecter would say, what is the thing in and of itself? What's a social media for? It's for social gathering. Is it for arguing? No, most people don't think of arguments as their primary use for a social gathering. Right. It happens, but it's not why you go. Right. You go to share stuff about movies and friends, you go see bands, you hang out, you go to a party, you chit-chat, you see how people's lives are. That's what it's primarily for. It's been hijacked over time by the sort of nature of our political mechanism currently. And there's nothing wrong with using all of it for whatever you're going to use it for. But, ultimately, what are you really making? What are you making a social media platform for, and what will make it more profitable? If there were political beer pushes in every movie theater, you would have never had a blockbuster film. Yeah. Right? Because you wouldn't have thought of going to the movies and hanging out. And so what he's trying to do, I think, and by the free speech aspect of it partially, and by verifying everyone, because he knows that bots cause most of the problems, that he, is trying to create a situation where, at the very least, if you're having an argument, at least it's with a real person. And that's fine. Yeah, and again,
I agree with that. Now, I'm wondering if you think he might try and use, you can buy into Twitter or pay your Twitter fee, but it has to be with Dogecoin or something like that. If he's going to try and use it to try and hype up Doge.
I made a joke. I said that. Yeah, no, I said that yesterday. I'm like, if he does that, the SEC doesn't exist, because that's exactly what that would be. Right. That is a manipulation. That's a financial manipulation, that the kind of stuff that he would actually try to do. And by the way, he could absolutely do it. Turnkey, create a Dogecoin terminal and go, everything bought here. It's just it's like Call of Duty points.
Right.
It's just the Call of Duty. Dogecoin will be the Call of Duty points of the Twitterverse in the Metaverse.
Right.
And then you start going, well, crap, people are buying virtual real estate in the Twitterverse, and they got to buy it with Doge. That gives it real material value, ironically.
Right.
Because you're buying virtual stuff. And that boosts his investment in Doge to the moon, I think is what he was saying.
Right.
Which is, by the way, also a reference to the fact that he might declare that once they have a base, that Doge would be the official currency of the moon. That if you buy and sell things, we're going to use a digital Doge exchange.
Right.
That's why it was called, everybody was joking digitally, Doge to the moon.
Right. But one thing, though, that I have to be critical of my fellow leftists or whatever is that, a lot of people are like, oh, well, Musk has bought Twitter, so I'm going to leave Twitter now. And I'm like, no, you can't. This is, unfortunately, what liberals, leftists sometimes will do is that, they want to take their ball and they'll want to go home. Meanwhile, give up the fight. Like, if there's going to be, more people on there, you have to be on there to support. Like, I don't have no plans of. You have
engage.
You have to engage. You have to go out. You have to retweet what they say and say this is why this is wrong. And not just give them because that's why we lose so many times is because we just give up. Well, it's harder to vote today this time. They made it harder to vote, so I'm just not going to vote. No, that's why you have to go stand in line and wait longer because you have to fight the horribleness that they're trying to do, and it sucks. And they'll make it harder, and they'll make it even harder for you to do. But you have to do it. You have to put up the fight. You have to do that. Wanted to talk.
And that's again, and I will say this too. Again, this goes to the concept of understanding. Careful where you're stepping. Chip, decided. That you have to be open to the idea that there are varying degrees, gray areas in humanity on other sides besides your own. You know what I mean? You can't just forgive the lies, hypocrisies, and problems of the people who talk like you do. You have to recognize that humans are humans, and if you're going to engage in that kind of behavior, you're going to have to respect the fact that you give people an out. If you really believe in prison reform, then and that people who've committed murder or sexual assault should deserve a second chance in society, and then you're going to call somebody like Elon Musk evil because he bought Twitter for $40 billion. I mean, please, who am I talking to then? What is the standard of the human being I'm having a discussion with? Doesn't exist. I don't know what your morals are. I just know you pick villains and go after them, but there's no standard. And that's bad. That's a terrible thing.
I just saw a comment in the chat stream on YouTube, and somebody had posted. All I said is somebody posted, "I just want Elon to give his sister Tosca more money for passion flicks because they need more movies." And I was going to say, "Hey, my wife needs to see that because somebody is agreeing with her." And then I'm like, "Oh, that was my wife in the chat." So hi, Cassie.
That's hilarious. He will. And again. Let's just say you have, as a human being, $200,000 in your bank account.
Right.
And for $50,000, you can buy a chain of pizzerias in your town. Not just one, but a chain of them. Now, you could probably bail your cousin out of jail and pay for your second cousin's college tuition, and you could probably do 2 weekends at the food shelter and eliminate hunger for a while, or you could own every pizzeria in town, which would maybe lead to you having another $200,000 from the profit of all those pizzerias, in which case you would have money left over all the time, no matter what you wanted to accomplish, even if it meant Moonbase Alpha, to feed every homeless person in town, send everybody to school, do all that kind of stuff.
Right.
At what point does your responsibility kick in? From the time that I think you have enough, or the time you think you have enough? And I think it's from when you think you have enough. It has to be. Otherwise, it's coercion. And I don't believe in, in any form of slavery from any angle, period, end of story.
Well,
because
it's
slippery slope
on the billionaires a little bit more and pay for some of that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No. Here's the thing. A flat corporate profit tax, great idea. But even, I went over Robert Reich's article that he just put out. I think they ran it on Raw Story. They were showing parts of it on Raw Story. And he was talking about the, corporate earnings, and they didn't pay any federal income tax on corporate earnings. And I'm like, well, earnings aren't income. And if, in the case of a lot of these, groups, they're investing, especially like Amazon, in tens of thousands of trucks and fulfillment centers during the, during COVID,
right,
because it was the biggest period of growth they could ever experience. It was happening. It was growing. And so that's the time, you make hay while the sun shines. And, and that's what they were doing. They weren't really coming up with any profits per se in the traditional sense because they weren't done. Amazon hadn't achieved its financial goals, and it still hasn't in a lot of ways.
Right.
Because
you can't tax net profits.
We think
of gross profits. You have to tax net profits. A lot of times people say
that's right.
we should tax Elon Musk, because tax his 88 billion or whatever many billions he's worth, 80 something $billion. I'm like, well, you can't. Most of that's locked into assets. Like you can't necessarily. They're not all liquid. You can't just go, okay, boom, here you go. So sometimes.
Yeah, he doesn't have $88 billion sitting in a bank account. It
right.
doesn't work like that. And if you tax them, basically you would remove 15% of 4 different industries and God knows whatever investments he had. So those would be removed. It's one of the reasons why he sold a big bunch of Twitter stock before he bought a bunch of it, so that he could pay, and he paid, quote unquote, more taxes than any billionaire in history. Right.
Right.
And that was or any individual in history. I guess technically speaking, even as percentage of wealth. So, honest to God, like I said, do I think would I spend his money differently? Of course I would. Is it my money? No, it isn't.
Right.
End of story. If I was very attractive, would I sleep with certain people? Would I if I was a beautiful woman, would I sleep with Brad Pitt? I am. I'm talking about. If I was Brad Pitt, would I or if I was Angelina Jolie, would I sleep with Brad Pitt? Yes, I probably would. What difference does it make though? I'm not. I don't have her body to do with what I will. I never will, and that's not the point. And it never should be. And once it is a possibility, none of the things that it doesn't even become a conversation. It doesn't exist. You're legitimately no longer talking about, free will. And I'm not for that. I can't be for that. I'm a hardliner about that stuff, and I'm just there.
One thing you brought up, you brought up something interesting. You brought up that as one of the things you might do with the money that you use to buy the pizza things is maybe you'd bail somebody out of jail. And a while back, I did have somebody who was a bail bondsman from Texas, who was very much opposed to the bail reform movement, and but I have people from the other side, discussing things. I didn't agree with a lot of what he said. I think we agreed on some things, because I like to try.
Yeah, sure, as you would, like adults.
Yeah, but like one of the things, the conservative talk show that I listen to every morning, pretty much, is they're always talking about all of the people, how all of the people who are in jail, sitting in jail, can't pay bail, who are involved in some way on January 6th, and then compared it to like one of the New Orleans Saints running backs was involved in an altercation last year, and he was able to get released on like a large bond, whatever, and I was like,
right,
you're almost there, you're almost getting it, but the problem is that it's always conservatives who are fighting bail reform. Especially with the bail bonds person, my thought was, well, the reason you're fighting bail reform is because and not wanting people to have recognizance bonds.
Your bread and butter.
That takes away your money, or that takes away the money of the people you're representing. But in the case of, if I'd be more than happy to sit down and talk with, are there people who perhaps might be able to be let out of jail, waiting their trial for the January 6th on recognizance bonds. Maybe there might be people who should be able to just go home, go to work, and then you charge them if they fail to appear. But it's always the conservatives who are fighting these efforts to reform the bail movement, because as we've seen, comparing some schmuck who went and walked around the Capitol building, trespassing and interrupting the legal actions of government, he doesn't have the millions of dollars available to him to pay the bond like a Alvin Kamara would. So that shows even still though, with those guys, it's a ridiculous argument anyways. The people who are still in jail over this stuff are people who, most of them were released on recognizance bonds. Most of them, like some of them, their buddy that they were there with was released on a recognizance bond and is home and is just awaiting trial and going through the thing. The only ones that are still in jail are people who have spit on cops in the jail, like fight with guards, refuse to get vaccinated, so they're in solitary all the time, are flight risk, have said literally in their bond hearing, if you let me out, I'd go straight up there and kill Nancy Pelosi. Like, of course you're not getting out on a recognizance bond in that situation. It's absurd. None of these guys who are in there because they don't have the money to bail themselves out. And an NFL guy, I think, when it comes to bail bonds especially, is an absurdity, because that guy's he's got a visibility. He can't disappear. Right.
So you can let somebody like that out on a recognizance bond because they can't be invisible. Ask OJ. Dude couldn't even make it halfway down to San Diego on the 405 wearing a fake beard with his buddy driving the car. Like, it's not possible. Secondarily, on average, when you're talking about people let out without without bond or bail or on recognizance stuff, or let out of jail early because of COVID, for example, they're looking at 70% recidivism in crime in all these folks. Now you can say 30% kept their nose clean or died of COVID or moved or whatever, because they're not keeping track of them for cross-country felonies. But you have a tremendous number of people who got out, committed another crime or multiple crimes, and keep getting a bail break. And this is the thing that all you got to do is fix it once. You can get a one-time, bail, no cash bail. Like, it doesn't even have to be your first offense. If it's your first offense, since you went to jail for the last thing, whatever it was, you've been out for a while, you can, you may have gone to federal penitentiary, but you got something that, they were going to, you need bail for. They can make that argument. But if you're on 8 free bail moments, if you're allowed to walk on 8 different charges, that's a broken system. Yeah. And the problem with that is, that's one of the things that me and the bail bondsman agreed on, and we talked about in the show, is that the recidivism of the people who are released on recognizance bonds and aren't just then locked back up if they continue to do it. Of course, the other side of the argument is that by requiring a lot of people to pay bonds who can't, so then everything else gets ruined, their recidivism of crime also takes place. So you have to, and he wasn't wanting to talk about that. Say that again. How do you mean?
The people who are in jail, who are forced to pay bonds, where recognizance bonds aren't allowed. The other side of the coin is that by forcing them to stay in jail longer, they're more likely to be convicted, to have longer sentences, and they're more likely at that point to also recommit crimes, because now they're not left with much options because they've lost their jobs, they've lost their house, etc. And the person who was fighting the bail reform didn't want to talk about that.
I understand. Statistically, the issue you have is that most of the time when you're talking about people who've been denied bail,
they've been denied bail because they're a danger to the community. They are the kind of person who would commit another crime. So the people who are
not denied bail, but I'm talking about I'm not talking about people denied bail. I'm talking about the people who just can't afford the bail. Like they say, okay, yeah.
Well, there's a lot. I mean, there's the bail itself, where the reason the bail is set outside their limit a lot of times,
right,
willfully and knowingly, that they can't afford it, is because nobody wants them on the street.
Right.
And the reason they don't want them on the street is because they will harm someone again. It was wanton disregard for human life. They didn't just carjack a car. They did it at gunpoint. They drove it through a residential neighborhood. They clipped another car. They almost killed a commuter. That kind of stuff. And you start stacking that up, like that person's not going to go back out on the road and go, all right, I got to walk the straight and narrow anytime soon.
Right.
And that's, so you're always going to have that statistic weighed by the number of people who are serial rapists who are caught and held without bond. Rapists, especially, who have a track record, or they get DNA on them, that led to the arrest.
Right.
They will hold them without bond. And that statistically is going to weigh the number of people who, I don't care how much money you have, you're not going to be able to afford the bond, even if the state it makes you create a bond number. The judge is going to try and get it outside the realm of where they can afford it, because they don't want them out on the street, because they know this person is a flight risk, because they have nothing tying them to the community other than a rape charge, or they're going to offend again, because they know they're going away for a long time. So, they're just going to do it. That's just what they are.
Right. And the issue shows
like
is
Bundy.
that
look at Bundy. They gave Bundy all this wiggle room, and he crawled out, a window and hid in the woods and all that kind of stuff. But when he broke away, his final spree was horrendously brutal, and it was because the legal system, who knew full well what he was and who he was, decided to tap the brakes and try to treat him like a gentleman, as they, because there was a lot of flailing about that as well. And he wanted to, maybe he's insane. So during the 70s and 80s, there was this big push, like what it means to be clinically insane and responsible for your actions. It was a huge part of this. And so Bundy played that game very well. So did Gacy to some degree. And both of them, in the one case, Gacy was allowed to kind of just be trailed for a while until they were like, screw it, pick him up. But Bundy was able to come and go a couple of times, because they were like, well, he might be ill, and like, well, that's arguably worse.
Right.
Then you're talking about institutionalizing someone until you can judge whether or not they should be in a mental hospital then, if that's the argument. Because they can't trust themselves. Why should society be able to trust them, especially when what they're doing is so egregious?
I mean, part of this issue is like you have like the extremists on both sides, where you have the people who are like, we have to have it, we have to continue how we're doing and no changes, and then you have the folks who are, we have to end bail altogether, and then people who like put together Kickstarters or GoFundMes to bail out the guy that ran over people at that like Minneapolis parade or whatever. Like, like.
I mean, let's be completely frank. There is no world where there are no prisons, no cops, or no judicial system at all. Like it's an absurd non-starter, and it's insane. And it is, if you want to talk about a white supremacist solution, there is no greater one than turning loose, people, criminals specifically because of the color of their skin, back into the communities they come from, to kill more of those people and sexually assault more of those people and rob more of those people and harm more of those people, because it's not their fault. And there seems to be, and I would say that the part of the argument that we see all the time that's kind of askew is that we talk more about the combination of race and crime when it comes to the perpetrator and not the victim.
Mm.
The discussion about it is never, you don't hear about the number of black victims in this country on the same scale. We talk about the number of incarcerated black men, as part of the conversation, as we should, but we almost never talk about the volume, because most people attack their own in group.
Right.
Most people do.
Right. That's a fact. If you look at the FBI stats, that's true.
That's a fact. Right. And if you statistically have more black perpetrators in jail, and you turn a statistically large number of those people loose, you will create statistically more black victims. Period. End of story. If you did it in Appalachia with a bunch of redneck, meth heads,
right,
you'd have the same effect on the locality of Eastern Kentucky. You would kill a bunch of poor white trash, but at the hands of poor white trash you turned loose on them.
Right.
That's true. Period. End of story. And I think what could balance this conversation is that recognition of black victims in this country, because the trauma, a lot of times, that trauma later, more than being in jail and not being rehabilitated, that trauma leads to someone picking up a gun later in life. And the vast majority of shootings that are going on in cities right now that are interpersonal violence is vengeance and beefs. And if you can intervene in that with the victims so that they don't pick it up, then that person never asked to be a part of that crime. They weren't the reason that crime happened. They were innocent until it happened to them. And if you can intervene in them and keep them from, turning their victimhood into an excuse to victimize, which is what we try to do when you intervene with sexual assault victims when it comes to children, especially, because we know that children that are preyed upon often grow up to prey upon others.
Right.
Not often. That's the wrong word. The people
happens.
that do prey upon people. Yeah.
The people who do the preying, a lot of them were also molested as kids. Not most.
More often than not. Correct. And so if you can intervene in those moments, get counseling, protection, remove them from that situation, you remove the generation of sexual predators out of the system. That's how you do it. And there's, to some degree, a system of that with victims in any impoverished situation. If you can intervene in that situation where the victims have some recourse, because we always talk about, when there's a murder or a shooting, or there's a rise in gun violence, gang violence, we always talk about rehabilitating the gang members or the violent felon or whoever they are, and it's an integral part of our conversation, without ever recognizing that the person who was the victim themselves, society, I think, has more of a responsibility to them than we do to the person who commits the crime.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen until our society takes mental health more seriously and treats mental health as it would treat any other medical condition, because that's something that this country is severely lacking in. Oh,
well, I think we're closer to that than a lot of societies. I really
Perhaps.
do. I mean, we obviously think about it. The problem is we are our own not wanting to stigmatize it. The old road to hell is paved with good intentions moment, but we have tried to destigmatize mental illness so much in the country that we have gotten rid of the majority of our institutions. I mean, Reagan famously defunded mental health in the country, turned a lot of people loose, and ended up, spiking. I mean, he single-handedly created comic relief on accident, because he single-handedly created the homelessness problem in the United States, the giant spike in it. That's something as a society we could recognize, work on, have a sense of reconciliation about, and focus on and go, we have a lot of homeless people that are never going to be able to take care of themselves. And it is immoral of society to say that just because a person doesn't have a relative or a loved one, to say my relative is sick, that society has to go, well, I guess they just gotta, if they can't make it to the shelter, we can't lock them up. So we just wait for winter to take them. Right? That's not what a moral society does.
Well,
yeah.
I've shook my head at how the homeless are treated here in New Orleans, because it's often just seen as just a nuisance or something. Like let's sweep it under the rug. Like there'll be lots of tent areas under bridges, and their solution during like big events is to just throw away all the tents so they can't be there anymore, instead of like finding a real solution to the problem.
Well, again, the issue is that there's not one problem. There's not one problem, and there's not one solution. Problems. You have three main categories. You have drug tourists, people who want to live that way. They're like Burning Man on the street. LA has a lot of those folks. They're not there because they have to. They're there because they want to, and they're taking advantage of the support structure for homelessness, which good people in California create for people who need them. Right. It's a growing number. That is the growth number in Los Angeles. The rise in number from say 15 years ago to now. Then there are mentally ill people by birth, by defect, and by drug use. People who have either been born with brain damage of some sort or mental illness, or have created it through massive drug use. And those people are either rehabilitatable or not, and therefore either need to be institutionalized or cared for until they can stand on their own 2 feet. But they're going to die on the street of an easily treatable infection or an overdose if we don't do something.
Right.
And then there are those that most people think of as the homeless, which is the people who fall through the cracks. That's the conversation most people have. People who missed rent too many times, got evicted, moms and kids, fathers and kids, the movies like Happiness, stories of people who are just trying their hardest and then got swamped by society. That number is the easiest to fix because it's the one we've spent the most money on. There are all kinds of programs. Getting people to that, if they have an addiction problem, is the only window. Shaking them loose from group 2 into group 3.
Right.
And then once they're in group 3, giving them a baseline they can work from. And then you just get at it and you tailor the programs, based on who's there. And then as you eliminate those groups, you take those resources and put them elsewhere. You don't just keep looking to find it like they used to do with heroin dealers and users to try and break them in the Middle West. The irony is that somebody said at one point, we've gotten it down to where there's two heroin addicts and two dealers in Davenport, Iowa, and they're all 4 of them are FBI agents. They're all faking because they've spent so much time. They've done it. They solved it. So now, but they can't just pack it up and go, okay, it's done. So I think the complexity of the issue of homelessness, and the inability for people to talk about it as such is why it dogs us.
Right. Did I lose you? Hal?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought we had lost you. We went really silent for a second. So.
Nope. I was just finished talking.
There you go.
Which happens rarely.
Now,
yeah.
And look, and a lot of times I interrupt more often, but I mean, you have such good things to say. It's like, let's let Hal continue talking.
Thanks.
It's a
right
good
on.
thing. So one of the, on a more, I guess, non-serious note or whatever. The reason we're doing this today instead of yesterday, because normally it's Wednesdays, 8 p.m. Central. Subscribe if you want notifications here on YouTube. And because I went to a concert last night. And has there ever been a time where you went to a concert and the band didn't play a song and that just shook? If I went to go see Paul McCartney and he didn't play Hey Jude or Live and Let Die, or if I went to see Guns N' Roses and didn't see Sweet Child of Mine, or if I went to go see 01 and didn't hear the slow song, I'd be disappointed. Yesterday I went to go see Primus, and Primus is first half of their show is their songs, and then the second half of their current tour is Tribute to Kings. They're doing they did the entirety of the Farewell to Kings album from Rush. But when they performed their songs, they did not perform Winona's Big Brown Beaver.
Jerry Was a Race Car Driver?
They didn't do that one either.
Okay, right.
Neither they didn't do Jerry Was a Race Car Driver or Winona's Big Brown Beaver. The only one that they did that I think had any commercial success was My Name Is Mud. And then one time one time we went to Counting Crows, they didn't play Mr. Jones. It's like, what? So,
Right. And here's the thing. I don't mind if you don't play your hit. The only thing worse than not playing your hit, though, is doing your jazz acoustic, low res, not quite the album version of it.
Yes.
Because if it becomes time during the set where I'm like, it's time for the hit, and somebody brings an area rug and 2 stools out, I'm going to burn the place to the ground. This is absurd. I will not.
Like, Rush is one of my favorite bands, probably my favorite band of all time.
Me too, yeah.
And when they would do Working Man, but did the first half reggae, I'm like, what are you doing? Just do Working Man. I want to hear.
Right.
I don't want to hear. Doom, 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 doom.
Yeah.
Come on. One concert I went to.
They got stuck in that.
One concert I went to, it was right after Katrina.
They got stuck in that reggae phase. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The reggae phase.
They got stuck in that reggae phase because of the police.
Yeah. Yeah. But no,
That's true.
There's
They got enamored by that.
There's one concert I went to right after Hurricane Katrina. Bruce Springsteen came to Jazz Fest with I think Pete Seeger, and did the Seeger Sessions stuff. So I saw him perform, and he did completely all folk music, and it was shown that he was going to be doing all folk music. So I wasn't mad at that I didn't get to hear, Born in the USA or Born to Run or any of his other popular songs, because I knew what he was doing specifically was not that. But
don't bait and switch me.
Yeah,
right?
I went to go see Paul McCartney. I would have been very mad if I didn't hear Hey Jude or Live and Let Die. I was happy because I heard both.
Right.
And there's clearly there's.
Oh, he knows what he's doing. He's not messing around.
And I thought maybe you might be in a band. I think since you have a band, and I figured you may have an opinion of, maybe it's different. Like, I know Adam Durst from Counting Crows is like, look, no song is guaranteed to be heard. You might not hear Long December or Mr. Jones. We want to play our new stuff. And I'm like, fine, but maybe be upfront about it. Let me see your set list first before I buy it.
Right. Well, in a lot of ways, that's what some bands do when they do the whole album front to back.
Right.
And you're like, maybe they'll tack something on at the end. But at the very least, I know that we're talking about, I'm here to see Queensryche, but they're basically, this is a Rage for Order show. If I want to hear Mindcrime, I'll wait till they do that.
Right.
And I don't feel disappointed that I'm not hearing Breaking the Silence or I Don't Believe in Love. And that's, a very similar thing. And there's like, and like I said, I have a chip on my shoulder too about down tuning too much. Half step fine, full step something's wrong. It'll sound weird. It'll sound muddy. It'll sound like somebody put a quarter on the record, and that we all have our own little wants and foibles. But ultimately, at its root, I just go see whatever the band is doing. If I like them, that's that.
Right. And
I just see them. I'm there to see what they do. That's like Tori Amos. Tori Amos is why I like enchiladas. And at one point, it's because she was doing a show, and in the middle of the show, she stopped a song, and she just didn't feel like playing it anymore. So she stopped the song, and she just started another one. And she played the whole song, and then it was great. And then she goes, sorry, sometimes the songs, they push themselves to the front, and it's just overwhelming. It's like when you want to have an enchilada, you got to have an enchilada.
Right.
And I was like, I need an enchilada right now. She totally hypnotized me.
Give me the enchiladas.
Yeah. Yes, give me enchiladas.
But no, they had.
But yeah, so that was the extent of it.
Well, one time I went to go see Rush, and it was clear that Geddy Lee changed, went down instead of going up because he didn't want to strain his voice too much because he's getting older. And I was like, okay, that's fine. A little variance is fine. I don't need to be exactly the same as what the record does. Because sometimes if you try too hard and you fail to match the record, it sounds terrible. Like I saw Def Leppard in concert, and he tried and he failed, and it was just like, ooh, that's not good.
Right. Well, and some people go through periods of that. Like they, it's a bad night, and that's okay. You know what I mean? It's like watching your favorite team lose. I'm not going to not go to the next game.
Right.
Right. That's the sort of the crucial part of it. But again, don't just drop the whole thing. Don't just go. It's not gonna sound anything like any of the records. You're done.
Right.
I'm like, okay, well then I'll go see a tribute band, which is why when I perform with Nerd Halen, we do these songs in the same key there are in the record.
Right.
I don't down tune like any of the. If I do any of the Van Hagar songs,
right.
And it's funny because Caleb and those guys are always trying to protect me, but they're essentially saying, if you need us to drop it down a little bit to make it easier, I'm like, okay, first of all, that's not what the fans came to see. They want it to sound like the record.
Right.
Secondly, one of the ways you lose your voice is chasing down tuning, especially if you're a really high singer, because you shift into chest voice and it ruins it forever. And I don't know why, but listen to Glenn Hughes from Deep Purple.
Mm-hmm.
That dude can still sing like a bird every single note because he never down-tuned. He never chased it. He just worked.
Well, so it's like a muscle, right? You got to keep working it and practicing, right?
Exactly. You got to keep it healthy. You got to, keep your esophagus clear. You can't get acid reflux and all that stuff. You got to watch the smoking or whatever else. And you got to have vocal rest and treat it like the instrument it is.
Yeah, here I'm talking about how about singing stuff. The best I do is karaoke.
That's good. Hey, that's a good thing. Everybody should. I mean, I'm positive on everyone singing. The world always needs more music.
Like I did after the drummer from Foo Fighters died. We did karaoke, and I went and did Monkey Wrench, and managed to get the last part out in one breath, but it was tough.
That's a tall order.
Yeah. But
I just did my hero at the Jam on Tuesday night at the Whiskey for Ukraine relief. And we had done my hero because we had a show the day he died. Nerd Halen did, and so we put it in the set, as a sort of a serious note, but we just felt like we must,
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Mountain Lady says, watch Hal covering a Kiss song made about 10 years ago. Slow song. Can't remember the song. Do you remember what Kiss songs you might do? Like, is it Beth or?
I mean, we did Shock Me,
mm-hmm.
All American Man. We've covered, let's see, Sure Know Something, Magic Touch. Yeah, I've done a few over the years.
Nice. Yeah, I think one of the best days, I used to do ride sharing like between full-time gigs or whatever, and I had someone who was a singer in my car, and we were talking about because I was talking about singing and doing karaoke and how I would never be able to hit the high note in Like a Stone, and she was like, well, just try and overshoot it, and I was like, okay, and I did, and it worked, so there you go.
Yeah, I'm one of those guys, every time they want to do an Audio Slave song, everybody's like, I don't want to, gargle clamshells tonight, so you do it.
Right.
So I always end up saying, and I love it, and it's a portion of your throat you just have to know and use. You just got to keep track of where those notes live on your vocal cords and just play it like a xylophone. You have to move up and down on your vocal cords, find them, do it as gently as possible. I do this thing where I have a really challenging song where I try to find a way to sing it as if I'm bored,
mm-hmm.
because it lowers the stress level, of what I'm doing, and it keeps my throat from tensing up, for one, which is oftentimes what will squeeze the note. And then from that point, I can find the easy breath points and but if you're anxious about it and you're really selling the song right out of the gate, you're going to do yourself in.
Right. Someone in the chat wants to know, Carl Smith asks, ask Hal if he knows what venue the Ukraine benefit video is playing, the recording, like, is there any way to see the recording of that night?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So they played it. It was a live stream. I asked Jess, they're supposed to they're sending me videos so I can post some of the stuff that I did.
Okay.
And then I think they're going to do a replay link. They have to repost it, kind of like we did with the Sexy Liberal shows.
Mm-hmm.
It's not quite the same length for tickets and watching before. So, and part of it's RIAA rules, because it's a live show versus a recorded show.
Sure.
And we're doing, it's all covers because it's a jam. So that's just how they get you.
Yes, that was a weird thing where one of the shows that I watched, or one of the shows one of my ex-girlfriends watched, I think it was Beverly Hills 90210, could not come out on DVD because when they made the licensing agreements with the music acts that came on the show, it did not include a DVD medium of releasing them. So I had to renegotiate all that stuff before it came out. Like with me, like when I used to do the terrestrial radio type show, for when I did Hypocrite of the Week, it wasn't the song that I use now, the if I had a chicken song, which is free to use. It was Yakety Sax, and the radio station covered everything, all the costs, and I can't quite figure out,
because they had a bass line.
Right. I can't quite figure out how to get Yakety Sax so I can do it on the podcast so that I can do it legally and not have the RIA coming after me, or whoever might do it come after me. So I'm stuck with if I have a chicken for right now until I can get like a huge, some staff behind me to be able to handle all that other stuff. But that's, I think, a long way away.
Well, I don't know that song from the original version. I only know is it Chibo Mato? Chicken. You guys
no, it's the hold on, let me see. It's it's Kevin MacLeod who does it. There's a link on the show page. It's just an acoustic, like dun 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 dun, dun. Like it's just it's kind of Yakety Sax reminiscent, but it's not quite not quite there. But I've made do with it.
Right.
So because I wanted to have my bit. Having my bit was more important than making sure it was only Yakety Sax. So
exactly. Cool. Well, I we should all we could all chip in and and re-record it, because I think it's public domain, the song. It's just that one recording that's been around forever since Benny Hill that we all reference.
Right.
That's the recording. I don't know how many people have done Yakety Sax.
Right, so just get it done. As long as it's in the public domain. It's kind of like how Tom Lehrer released things in the public domain, so you can't use his recordings, but you can have other people, I guess, record his music for you. So I could use Tom Lehrer's music behind things if I wanted to. I just have somebody else record it for me, which would be awesome.
Well, that's cool.
So one of my favorite, I guess, self-brag music-y stuff is we were on a cruise one time, and they had live band karaoke. Where you do karaoke, but instead of having the karaoke music behind you, you have the live band behind you playing the music. And I think they went up a key on Livin' La Vida Loca because it got way too high, and I think they did it purposefully just to F with me.
Sure.
But the other two songs I did was Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong and Take On Me. Aha. And I do Louis Armstrong, like, oh yeah, I see skies of blue. So I do the whole thing like that, and then I get and so one of the next day one of the band people stopped, was like, how do you do that? How do you go from doing the Louis Armstrong to the high notes on? And I'm like, I'm like, you are
the in a day.
I'm like, You're a professional musician. Why are you asking me this question? Like, you should know this better than me. I just make sure to keep my my throat hydrated. Like, that's just how I do it. And then I overshoot and make sure that I get the falsetto right. But yeah, so it was very weird having a professional musician ask me how I do something musically. So, because normally I don't think I'm that good.
Well, everybody hunts for a better technique, and if they see somebody doing it with less effort than they do, like, they might be able to do it, but they're like, is there a way because the difference between a professional and an amateur is amateurs can do anything, but a professional can do it tomorrow at 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock. That's the only difference. Amateur means for love. Doesn't mean professionals don't love it. They just love it enough to, be able to deliver on demand.
Right. So, and it's I've come from, like, my dad's side is a very, very musical family. I didn't pick up all of the genes. I don't think where like my uncle, like, plays, like, probably almost any instrument can come to mind. My dad does, cello, guitar, piano. My grandfather did that.
That's reassuring. I mean,
but my thing is that
I think.
My thing is that I think, like, because my dad's not a good teacher, that's why I probably didn't pick up as many instruments or pick up the instruments or be as much into music as I would have been had he had the teaching skills of my uncle. And one time we were at a Thanksgiving meal or whatever, and afterwards we're all sitting around playing music, singing or whatever, and my youngest son is sitting there strumming this toy guitar, and it's like boom, 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 and my dad is visibly getting frustrated at the fact that it's very distracting to him, and my uncle's like, if you don't let him play, he won't remain interested. And I'm like, this is why I don't play an instrument right now. This is why I don't play guitar. Or I can only play like 3 songs on the guitar because I didn't learn how fully.
Right. Well, again, the reason they say play an instrument is because that's where it starts.
Right.
Some people can really work an instrument, but you got to learn how to play an instrument first.
Right. But yeah, so I have a little half-size guitar that they bought him, and I was trying to, during the pandemic, one of the projects was trying to get him to take, like, kind of these online lessons along with me, but it turned out his little fingers were still a little too small to fit the guitar, so we'll have to wait on that one for a little bit. But
it's always a tough one scale-wise, right?
Yeah.
Piano is one of those areas where, like, piano, since it always stays the same size, for the most part, it's the spread gets easier over time. So one of the reasons you start a kid on piano is because it feels like stretching chords out is really uncomfortable, but as their hand gets bigger, it gets easier.
Right.
Which is not usually, as things get more difficult and you get more advanced, there's never an element of other instruments where it gets easier. And that's one of the upsides of piano.
Right.
Keyboards.
Cool. Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you want to talk about? Any other issues or anything else you want to plug? Anything else you're doing in the next week or two or whatever that you want to let people know about?
Just infotainmentwars.com. People could come and watch the live show, and then of course the lovely Saturday I do my radio show out of WCPT in Chicago, and it's we live stream that as well on the same channel. If people want to join my Twitch, it's twitch.tv/Hal Sparks. That really helps a lot. And I have a Patreon like everybody else, patreon.com/Hal Sparks. And I believe in firing on all cylinders. I don't want to put the weight of my show and livelihood on one group of listeners to carry the rest. So I try to spread it out wider across multiple platforms, and hopefully it becomes less of a burden for people.
That is one thing I forgot to tell you that I wanted to tell you before you logged off, was that I usually watch you on YouTube, but I had your Twitch channel open, and nothing was going on at the time, but then it was just still open on my laptop. So then all of a sudden I get this notification over the Alexa, which was, Hal Sparks is coming from your computer. So it went live, and just Hal Sparks coming from my office, and I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, just Hal Sparks is talking from my office. So there you go. You got another view, I guess.
I
on
control
Twitch.
your home. Right.
Awesome. So
at least I know now to just go, Alexa, turn off the lights, and I have control over your home.
That would be hilarious if you were just if it would have been like, Alexa, announce whatever, and then it would announce something from you, and I'd be like, whoa, that would have been cool. That would have been freaky. Anyway, so again, thank you so much.
I might. Yeah. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, very much. Anytime. Hopefully see you again next month. And, again, infotainmentwars.com. If most of the people I'm sure in the chat already know infotainmentwars.com. I appreciate y'all for coming and listening to the show as well. If you've liked this so far, like and subscribe to the channel. And make sure if you haven't followed Hal yet at all the different places, just go to halsparks.com, infotainmentwars.com. Hal Sparks, Mega Worldwide.
That's right.
Every day, usually twice a day, and on Saturdays as well. Thank you so much again. It was great having you on, and look forward to having you on again.
Thanks a lot, man. Okay, have a great night.
You as well. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
All right, we're going to take one final little break. Allow me to get a sip of water or whatever, and then we'll wind up ending the show. Again, we'll probably about 5 or 10 more minutes now. If anybody wants to call in and talk about anything that we talked about, it's 914-803-4131. 914-803-4131. This is Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left. That's right.
Greetings. This is Nimbus Yosh, host of the Percy Podcast. What is the Percy Podcast? Well, it's pretty much the smoothest talking host you'll ever hear in your life, talking about all kinds of things. Political things, nerdy things, fun things, not so fun things. Go ahead, give a listen, and follow at the Percy Podcast for more updates and information. Why not sit back and take a listen to one of the best podcasts you'll ever hear, and no one else will. Catch you on the tunes.
Do you want to set money aside for a rainy day? Do you want to open an account that will give you a savings bonus each month? What if I told you that you can get both and have a chance to win $10 million? Yada is an FDIC-insured bank, and when you go to yada.liberaldan.com, open an account, and make your first deposit, you will get 100 entries into the next weekly drawing. You will also get entries each week you have a balance. So go to yada.liberaldan.com. That's YOTTA.liberaldan.com. Using gerrymandering, voter suppression, and other nefarious tactics, the Republican Party has manipulated our electoral system to maintain as much control as possible despite being a party in the minority. Liberal Dan Radio seeks to change that, and I need your help in doing so. Liberal Dan Radio has partnered with Levelfield to help us use tools that are typically only available to big money donors. When you go to stopthecoup.liberaldan.com and make your contribution, it will encourage other voters to reach out to their legislators to pass legislation to stop gerrymandering and voter suppression, and target elected officials who refuse to protect the vote. Every eligible voter should be able to cast a ballot, and that ballot should have the same power as everyone else. I can't do this alone. I need your help. So please go to stopthecoup.liberaldan.com and make your contribution today. That's stopthecoup.liberaldan.com. Stopthecoup.liberaldan.com. Political advertising paid for by Levelfield. Contributions are not tax deductible as charitable contributions.
And welcome back to Liberal Dan Radio, Talk from the Left, that's right. This is your host, Dan Zimmerman, coming at you from New Orleans, Louisiana. To join the conversation, it's area code 914-803-4131. That is 914-803-4131, and we do have a caller, so we'll get to that in a second. Just, again, big thanks to Hal Sparks for coming on the show. Every episode we do with Hal is a great one. We still have about 20 minutes left in the stream before I have to take a hard break, but I figured if any of the people still watching wanted to call in, talk about anything in particular, or just rave about how wonderful Hal was on the show, or how wonderful I was with Hal on the show, or whatever, you can go ahead and do so. And or if you want to bring up another topic, we can cover that one real quick before we go ahead and end the show for tonight. So thank you, caller. What's your name? Where you're from? Hello.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, I am, yes.
Really, truly? This is crazy. Okay.
Well, welcome.
I just want to say hello.
Oh, hello. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for calling in. I appreciate it. It's great to have, lots of listeners joining in and contributing to the chat and calling in as well. Love to have it. Love to have the interactions with the people. So
I have a bit of a delay here, but I'm dealing with it. Big fan of Hal Sparks, and just kind of wanted to say you did a good job with him. Just let him go.
Yeah, sometimes that's one thing you got to know when to interrupt, and you got to know when to just let it flow and let the and Hal he is a wealth of information about a lot of things. Robert Douglas in the chat says you should trade Wednesday for Thursday. There's a lot of people watching. Hopefully we'll see if maybe Wednesday y'all come next. If next time it might be on a Wednesday, so we'll see. If it turns out that I get more people listening on a Wednesday than a Thursday, let me know in the chat if you are more likely to watch on a Thursday than on a Wednesday, and maybe I will change the date. I used to do it on Thursday as well. I used to be on Thursdays, and then I switched it to Wednesdays because I thought Wednesdays would be better. And Wednesdays also, I had something that I would do on Thursdays typically, so I think that's why I ultimately ended up changing it to Wednesdays. But yeah, in the if there are people
you are really trying to confuse me right now. You almost had me convinced it was Wednesday.
Nice. Well, I thought it was Wednesday too for a second, and I was like, wait, no, today is Thursday, but today is the day I'm doing my podcast. So, but yeah, so
exactly.
But everybody, yeah, let me know. Either let me know in chat or email me liberaldanradio@gmail.com, and let me know if anybody, if y'all would rather it be on a Thursday, because look. If y'all want to be my listeners and y'all want to participate with the shows and you want to if you're more likely to see me on a Thursday, hey, more than it. Maybe I'll put up a poll on Twitter. When are you more likely to watch Liberal Dan Radio? It's on Liberal Dan Radio on Twitter. When are you more likely to listen?
Yeah,
Wednesdays or
Hal
Thursdays?
only comes on. Hal comes on late on Wednesdays. Or sorry, I lied. Hal comes on late on Thursdays.
Okay.
It's his family friendly day. He does stuff before the show, so he comes on an hour late.
Okay.
So he gets a slightly smaller audience, but it is his devoted audience.
Right, but then that rolled right into my show, but typically.
I know.
Yeah.
So it was a great honor to you that he decided to come on after you.
Yeah, I mean, look, the first time it happened, because this is the third show I've done with Hal. So the first time he came on, I'll tell you, I was, somebody, the guy who emailed me was like, would you like to have Hal Sparks on your show? Because he had gotten me somebody else on my show as well. And I was like, would you like to have Hal Sparks? I'm like, is the Pope Catholic? I mean, yeah, absolutely, I would love to have Hal Sparks on my show. And then it turned out, I only said,
okay.
Look, I said, come on for a half hour, whatever. We ended up talking for the entire length of the show. We talked from like 8:30 my time to 11 o'clock my time. It was one of my best shows I ever did. And then he came on the next time. He even stepped away from doing something to be able to talk into the show. It wasn't as long, but the shows with Hal have been wonderful, have been great. He's very informative, very informative.
Assure your audience that it is really me.
It is really. And what was your username?
It is Wes.
It's Wes. Okay. Yeah. So this is Wes. So everybody.
Wes
say hi to
Webb.
Wes.
Right
Wes
now I'm
Webb.
157. 157.
Nice. Okay. Well, again.
I'm an old man. I was born in January of 1957.
Nice. Yes. Aaron Wes is like, is it Wes? I'm like, yes, it's Wes. So there you go. It's Wes.
Most of the people that are on this list right now know who I am.
Yes. Well, I'm very happy to know you as well. I appreciate you calling in. Is there anything else you want to talk about, or?
Not really. I just wanted to tell you that you are truly honored, sir. I am not sure why Hal is choosing you, but it is a great honor.
I was very happy to do it, and I'm I think if we didn't get along as well as we did in the first show or the first two shows, he probably wouldn't be coming back. But I think it's because we do bounce ideas off each other really well. I think we do get along about the things. Most things we agree on, a lot of things we might disagree on some, but we have a good conversation about it. And I think that shows. So I'm very happy that he was able to do so. So I do appreciate you calling in.
I disagree with that little guy all the time.
Well, thank you again very much for calling in. I'll go ahead. I'm going to put you back on mute if you want to listen here, or you can just listen on YouTube as well. Either way works. So yeah, again, if you heard the little commercial that I played towards the end of the last commercial break, I was talking about a lot. Me and Hal talked about how the Republicans are trying to steal elections, how they're trying to maintain as a minority party. So one of the things I've tried to do is work with this organization called Level Field in order to try and fight the attempts at gerrymandering, voter suppression, etc. So you can go to stopthecoup.liberaldan.com and find out more information about that. If you want to support the show, you can support the show by becoming a Liberal Dan Radio patron. Go to patreon.com/liberaldan or patreon.liberaldan.com. If you can't, times can be tough. If you can't afford that, the best thing you do to support the show is just follow me on all my social media platforms. It's Liberal Dan Radio on Twitter, on TikTok. It's facebook.com/liberaldan, and there's liberaldan.com as well. Let's see. Stephanie says, Hal is a lot like us, is passionate about politics, so we can go on and on. Absolutely. I mean, I can, there are some times where I've done 3-hour shows without guests, just rambling on and on about subjects that just, usually the plan is I'm going to do an hour show. I do an hour show and that's it. But if there's more audience participation, it'll last longer. And again, most of my shows with Hal go at least 2.5 hours. I did a show, you could look it up. It's on YouTube. It's also on Blog Talk Radio. One of the shows that I did was just, because I am overweight. I've lived life as a large man for a while. So just kind of going over all of the different things that affect, that people might not think about. I think that was one of my better shows as well. You can go back and look at my past ones. I also have short videos, like things I post on TikTok. I'll put up on YouTube as well. Some of the things about Stop the Coup. I have a 4-part video series about the GOP coup and how they worked up to the point where they were, at least before the 2020 elections. So there's lots of stuff to check out on the channel. I saw everybody, if you're new to Liberal Dan Radio, I would just ask, subscribe to the channel, check some things out, watch some videos at your leisure, listen to some of the videos in the background if you want to listen to old episodes, especially with the ones with me and Hal. I'd appreciate it. Robert Douglas says, Dan, that's not true what you said about Republicans stealing elections. Well, I mean, the Republicans are the worst party when it comes to gerrymandering. There are Democrats who do gerrymander, it's true. There are states like, in some of my videos that I've posted up on YouTube, showed how Connecticut doesn't have any Republican districts, even though their state population of Republicans should have them have at least one. And then Oklahoma is the same way, just opposite. Louisiana, but the Republican states are the ones that just are so blatant, except for Maryland. Maryland is terrible too. And they gerrymander more towards the Democrats. But Florida just eliminated 2 minority districts and added 4 Republican districts because of the seats that they've gained. You have Texas. Texas had gained a seat or 2, and the reason they gained those 2 seats was because of the influx of Black, Indigenous, and other persons of color into the state, mostly Black and Latino, Latinx people who are new citizens, new residents of the state, and that's why they got the increase in seats. But those 2 new seats are going to white conservatives instead of going to the people who helped them. So, and when you gerrymander and it's another form of disenfranchisement, because you can't, you're not giving people the same say. Like here in Louisiana is 1/3 firmly Democrat. That's the floor. And we have a Democratic governor who's a conservative Democrat, so there is room for maybe one swing district. There's clearly enough for 3, if not 4, Republicans, but the current way that the map is drawn, they shoved all of the Black voters into one gerrymandered, meandering district that just goes up the Mississippi River, and the Democrats only have 1 seat in the state of Louisiana instead of the 2 that they at minimum should have, and maybe even 3 if you consider the fact that you have enough voters in Louisiana to elect a Democratic governor, not once but twice. So even though it's a red state, even though we went for Trump, we still elected a Republican governor, a Democratic governor twice. Now, granted, the first time that he won against David Vitter, who we talked about earlier, the serious sinner who, wore diaper with prostitutes on the Canal Street brothel, supposedly. He did admit to serious sins involving hookers, but he didn't admit to the diaper thing. So Edwards was able to beat him first, and then he had this guy called Gary Rasponi, who was like Trump wannabe, wealthy Louisiana businessman who was in over his head. They did one debate. He looked like a fish out of water in the debate. He clearly got annihilated in that debate, and that's why the state decided to continue on with Edwards because of the fact that But Louisiana, at the very minimum, should have 2 congressional seats that are to vote for Democrats but only vote 1. So my say is diluted in half because of the fact that the Republicans have gerrymandered the state in such a way. Jen says, I will be checking out previous. I listen to all the work. Same with Hal. Most times I make today work quicker. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Wes Webb is back off now. He's still on mute, but he's there. So I was just wanting to talk about the other stuff. If you have another question, you can hit the one. If you have something else you want to say, Wes, you can always hit the 1 button, and then I'll let me know that you have another thing to say. But we only have about 8 minutes left in the show, so we're trying to close things up. Let's see. Illinois federal district maps are insane, totally favoring Democrats. Yes. Well, yeah, look, it's one of those things where both sides do it, but the Republicans do it much worse. The Republicans do it I think the Republicans have 12 more seats than they should because of their gerrymandering. Yes, there are seats that where sometimes the Democrats offset it. Like, California might have more Democrats than they should, but those are offsetting the other ones. In reality, I think, maybe the time is due to not even have districts, but I'm not even there. I don't think people are ready for that conversation yet. They have to understand how gerrymandering affects. And look, in my video series that I started, I was very clear. If you're a Democratic state and you're not representing your Republicans fairly, I'm going to be critical of you. And if you're a Republican state not representing your Democrats fairly, I'm going to also be criticizing you. So there you go. Wes says you're not going to remember this tomorrow. Funny. Never a discussion without the racism involved. Good job. I mean, racism is often a valid thing because you have these situations where the voters that get, disproportionately disenfranchised are black voters. Like, for example, let's take the Georgia law, SB 202, the one where people are not allowed to hand out water to people waiting in lines. You can only get the bottle. You can only water from a kiosk. Like, I guess once you get in the voting precinct, they allowed for that. But you can't, like, if I was living in Georgia and I was waiting in line to vote, if my wife came up to me and handed me a bottle of water, that would be a crime on her part. So you can't get water handed out within 25 feet of anybody waiting in line. Problem then becomes is that the way that Georgia operates is that the people who are living in the districts that have majority minority voters or majority black voters, those districts are more likely to have larger lines that people have to wait in. So it becomes then more difficult to cast a vote because now you have to wait longer in line than you might be waiting in one of the white precincts. So they haven't fairly and equitably managed to handle the situation of making sure that the people in those black districts don't have to wait in line too long. And then they're making it more uncomfortable with not being able to give them any water or anything if they need a bottle of water. Then you have other situations like in Florida when Kemp was Secretary of State running for governor, he disenfranchised, he kicked lots of people off the rolls. Disproportionate amount of people that were kicked off the rolls were black voters over white voters, and then the people that try to re-register to vote, they used a exact match system where, let's say somebody made a clerical error entering my driver's license, put a hyphen there, and I didn't put a hyphen on my voter registration, even though everything else is the same. Like if my name was Daniel hyphen J instead of Daniel space J, and the state records had Daniel hyphen J, and my voter application said Daniel space J, that's not an exact match, so then my voter registration gets tossed to the side. So you had a disproportionate amount of people, especially black voters, who tried to re-register to vote in the state of Georgia in 2018 when Kemp was running against Stacey Abrams, who were not able to get to cast a ballot. Why? Because they were disenfranchised, because they were kicked off the rolls, even though they lived in the same county that they lived in previously, and they were not able to re-register to vote because they just either let the application sit on the desk, or they just flat out denied the application because the application had a not exact match, but enforced to a ridiculous degree. Let's see, two-party system was okay when it was 1800. The ability to communicate over many miles did not exist in an efficient manner officially when it comes to election. That's one of the reasons why I say that maybe we don't even need congressional districts right now. Elect slates of candidates in states, because congressional districts were needed because one person represented a geographic area, and the amount of time it took to handle that geographic area was great. Now you can talk to everybody in a geographic area on a Zoom meeting, and it could be very easy to talk to people from your districts. You might not even need the district. You can talk to people in the state. You can cross most states in the amount of time it would probably take to cross a very short distance in the past. So we have cars, we have planes, we have trains, we have the ability to communicate much more quickly and to travel much more quickly. So maybe the idea of a congressional district is an antiquated one, but we only have 3 minutes left in the show, so I don't think we'll necessarily be able to go into that much detail about my idea for doing slates of candidates instead of congressional districts. See, this will most likely continue to say, losing its edge and not responsive enough to the changing world around anymore. Faulty two-party system is so out of date. A lot of the things, one of the mechanisms that kind of requires a two-party system. Okay, he raised his hand, so you got about a minute. So let's put Wes back on and see what's your last before we have to end. What's the last point?
Oh my, there are too many points, but I just want to tell you, I am a rhino.
Okay.
I thought I was a Republican, but all of a sudden I am not. Okay?
Right.
But I am definitely not one of those goddamn Democrats. So what am I? Okay.
You can be whatever it is that you want to be. That's what's great about this country. You should be whatever it is that you feel like
90 seconds.
Whatever you fit, whatever fits should work for you. I mean, I wouldn't call anybody a rhino or whatever. But I mean, sometimes if you're not, and I'll go ahead and mute you for a second because we're about to end. If sometimes too much purity politics is played in partisan politics, and that's one of the things where if you don't match up exactly, you're shunned. You're called a rhino or a dino, and then you're ignored or shunned just because you dare to speak one difference of opinion.
60
that
seconds.
is the end of this week's episode of Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left. That's right. We are at least on Blog Talk. Right, I might be able to. No. I don't know. We could potentially last a little longer on YouTube, but I'll be back next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central, blogtalkradio.com/LiberalDan. Also, Liberal Dan Radio on YouTube. Again, if you haven't liked it already, like this video, subscribe to the channel, support the Patreon, patreon.com/LiberalDan. Follow me on social media, Liberal Dan Radio on Twitter, TikTok, not on Twitch yet, maybe I'll do that, and facebook.com/LiberalDan. Until next week, this is Dan Zimmerman with Liberal Dan Radio. Talk from the left. That's right.
Ten seconds.
Or you'll hear that you are now.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.
All right, so we are done with the Blog Talk Radio show, so I don't have the cool little soundboards or anything, but technically still, I could still talk for a little bit longer, but I mean, no option to call in at this point because Blog Talk Radio is what enables me to do that. I would even check. There was 2 people who jumped in and left the conversation on Blog Talk Radio. But Foggy, thank you as well. Robert, good night. Thank you all. I appreciate y'all. Jen, Wes, Aaron, Hide in the Shadows, Kinky Streets, Alan Drifter, Kimchi. Thank y'all again very much for joining us in the show. what is it? Wes Webb says he didn't realize that he was talking to Jesus. Funny. Are you talking about yourself or are you talking about Hal? Anyway, so again, thank you all very much. Again, I do appreciate you joining us for the show. It was a great one. I look forward to seeing you. Hopefully, without Hal, you'll still join next week, Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central. Again, and what I said, if I didn't really see anybody on the show, in the show stream, saying whether or not they would prefer Thursdays over Wednesdays. If enough people say that they prefer Thursdays over Wednesdays, I will absolutely switch the show to Thursdays, because I want to be here to entertain y'all. I want to be here to have good conversations with y'all. So if you're more likely to show up on Thursdays versus Wednesdays, so let me know. Just go to Twitter, Liberland Radio on Twitter, since I'm still there. I plan on still being there. I'll put a poll up and be like, what day would you be more likely to listen to me, either Wednesdays or Thursdays? And if enough people respond and I get a large enough bunch of people say, that says Thursday definitely, as opposed to Wednesday or it doesn't matter, then I'll potentially switch the show accordingly. But again, a little bit of bonus after show. But I appreciate y'all again very much for joining us. Thank you very much, and y'all have